Hello there, my dreamy travelers. Tonight, we venture into the awakening, into Bella's first breath as something new, something immortal, a story of ancient laws and impossible children, of witnesses gathered and battles that never were. Here, in the space between transformation and forever, between newborn and eternal, between one heartbeat's end and eternity's beginning, a family fights for survival. So, before you settle in, please support us and subscribe to the channel so we can keep creating these Twilight stories. Well, now it's time. Get yourself settled in. Close your eyes. Breathe in very slow. And let the gentle darkness embrace you. Welcome to Breaking Dawn Part 2, where awakening becomes revolution and forever finally begins. Bella's first sensation as a vampire was sound, not the muffled, limited hearing of her human life, but an explosion of auditory input that threatened to overwhelm her newly transformed mind. She could hear everything simultaneously. The whisper of wind through individual pine needles miles away. The rustle of a spider moving across its web in the forest. The breathing of 7 vampires standing in the room with her. The rapid thrum of her daughter's heartbeat upstairs. Each distinct and crystalline and absolutely impossible to ignore. Her eyes opened, and the world resolved into clarity that made her human vision seem like looking through frosted glass. Every detail stood out with perfect sharpness. The grain of the wooden ceiling above her, individual dust motes floating in streams of sunlight, the faces of her family arranged around her with expressions that combined hope and concern and wonder. She could see the topaz flecks in Edward's golden eyes, could count Emmett's individual eyelashes from across the room, could distinguish 73 different shades of white in Alice's pale skin. And the thirst. Oh, the thirst was a burning column of fire in her throat, demanding satisfaction with an intensity that made thought nearly impossible. Her body understood what it needed, even if her mind was still catching up to her transformation. Blood. The scent of it filled the house, called to her from upstairs, where Renesmee slept, from outside, where Jacob's warm human blood pumped through living veins. Every instinct screamed at her to hunt, to feed, to satisfy the burning that consumed her throat. Edward's face appeared above her, his expression cautious, despite the love radiating from his golden eyes. "Bella," he said softly, and his voice was music. Layers of tone and texture she'd never fully appreciated as a human. "How do you feel? Do you remember yourself? Do you remember me?" "Edward," Bella said, and her own voice emerged different, more resonant, carrying a musical quality that surprised her. "I remember everything. The transformation, the pain, Renesmee's birth. I remember all of it." Relief flooded Edward's features, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "You maintained your memories, your sense of self. Bella, that's remarkable for a newborn. Most new vampires wake confused, driven purely by thirst, unable to access their human memories for days or even weeks. "I'm thirsty," Bella admitted, and the words felt inadequate to describe the burning desperation in her throat. "Edward, I need to hunt. I need blood now." "I know," Edward said gently, offering his hand to help her sit up. "We're going hunting immediately, but first, you need to understand your strength. Everything you do requires conscious control now. Your body is capable of destroying things accidentally, including people you love. So move slowly. Think before you act." Bella took his offered hand and sat up in one fluid motion that felt both foreign and natural. Her body responded to thought with speed and precision that her human form had never possessed. She stood, and the movement was grace itself. No clumsiness or uncertainty, just perfect coordination between intention and execution. The family gave her space, watching her carefully. Carlyle stood nearest, his medical instincts making him the natural monitor of her condition. Alice vibrated with barely contained excitement, clearly having seen this moment in her visions. Rosalie held back near the stairs, and Bella understood suddenly that Rosalie was positioned between her and Renesmee, ready to protect the baby if Bella's newborn instincts proved too strong to control. The realization should have hurt, but Bella felt only gratitude. Renesmee's safety mattered more than pride. "I want to see her," Bella said, looking at Rosalie. "I want to meet my daughter properly, but I need to hunt first, don't I? I need to take the edge off the thirst before I can be near her safely." "Yes," Edward said, approval evident in his voice. "Your awareness is exceptional, Bella. Most newborns can't think past their thirst long enough to recognize danger to others. Come with me. We'll hunt together, and then you can meet Renesmee without fear of hurting her." They moved through the house, and Bella marveled at how differently she experienced the familiar space. She could see in perfect detail even in rooms without lights. She could smell everything, wood and fabric and the lingering scent of the vampires who lived here and the human who visited. She reached the back door, and Edward stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. "One more thing before we go outside," Edward said quietly. "Your strength is immense right now. Newborn vampires are stronger than older ones. Your human blood still lingers in your tissues, making you more powerful than even Emmett for your first year. So when you run, when you hunt, remember that you can destroy trees if you run into them, can crush rocks if you grip them too hard. Control is everything." Bella nodded, processing the information, trying to calibrate her understanding of her new capabilities. Then Edward opened the door, and they stepped into the forest together. The moment Bella began to run, she understood what Edward meant about strength and speed. The world blurred around her as she moved faster than any human could comprehend, her feet barely touching the ground, her body flowing through the forest like water. Trees passed in streaks of brown and green. The wind of her passage roared in her ears, and the sheer joy of movement, of speed, of physical capability beyond anything she'd experienced as a clumsy human made her want to laugh with pure delight. Edward ran beside her, matching her pace easily, his expression showing pleasure at her obvious enjoyment. They ran for miles, putting distance between themselves and the house, ensuring they were deep enough in the wilderness that encountering humans would be unlikely. Then Edward slowed, his posture shifting into something predatory. "Do you smell that?" he asked quietly. Bella stopped and inhaled, and suddenly the world organized itself around scent in ways she'd never imagined. She could smell deer half a mile away, could distinguish the musk of their fur from the earth they walked on. She could smell small animals, rabbits, squirrels, birds, and beneath it all, something larger, something that made her throat burn with intensified need. "Mountain lion," Edward said, confirming what Bella's instincts had already identified. "About 3 miles north. Do you want to try for it? They're challenging prey, but incredibly satisfying." Bella's body answered before her mind could formulate a response. She was moving toward the scent, her hunting instincts taking over, her focus narrowing to the prey she needed to catch. The mountain lion's scent grew stronger as she approached, and she could hear it now, the soft pad of its paws on stone, the rumble of its breath, the beating of its heart pumping blood she desperately needed. The hunt was brief and brutal and absolutely natural. Bella's newborn strength and speed made her more than a match for the large predator. She brought it down with efficiency that would have horrified her human self, but felt perfectly right to her vampire nature. And when she bit down, when the warm blood flooded her throat, the relief was instantaneous and overwhelming. The burning didn't disappear entirely, but it diminished to manageable levels, satisfaction spreading through her system. She fed until the mountain lion's heart stopped beating, until every drop had been consumed, and then she released it and stood, her face and clothing covered in blood, feeling more herself than she had since waking. Edward watched her with an expression that combined pride and love and something like awe. "Bella, you're remarkable. The control you showed during that hunt, the efficiency. You're unlike any newborn I've ever seen or heard of." "I didn't feel out of control," Bella admitted, wiping blood from her mouth with the back of her hand. "I knew what I was doing. I was aware of myself the entire time." "That awareness is the key," Edward said. "Most newborns are lost to instinct during their first months, but you're present, conscious, capable of thought beyond the thirst. It's extraordinary." They hunted twice more, Bella taking down a deer and then another mountain lion, building her strength and control with each feeding. By the time they started back toward the house, the burning in her throat had become a low ache rather than a consuming fire, manageable, controllable. She felt confident that she could be near Renesmee without danger. But as they approached the house, a new scent hit Bella with devastating force. Human, fresh human blood, pumping through living veins, calling to her with intensity that made the animal blood seem like water compared to wine. The scent was exquisite, maddening, absolutely irresistible. Her body froze, every muscle tensing, her focus narrowing to the source of that incredible smell. Edward's hand closed around her arm, his grip gentle but unbreakable. "Bella, stop. Those are hikers. Humans on the trail that passes near our property. You cannot hunt them." "I know," Bella managed, but her voice came out strained, her body fighting her mind's command to stay still. "Edward, I know I can't, but the smell." "I know," Edward said, understanding in his voice. "Human blood calls to us all. It's stronger, richer, more satisfying than animal blood will ever be. But we choose not to drink it. We choose control over instinct. Can you do that, Bella? Can you choose?" The humans were getting closer, their voices carrying through the forest, their scent growing stronger with each step they took. Bella could hear their heartbeats now, could smell the individual variations in their blood. A man, a woman, and a small child. A family hiking together, completely unaware that death stood 100 yards away, barely held in check. Every instinct Bella possessed screamed at her to hunt, to feed, to satisfy the burning that the human scent had reignited in her throat. Her body wanted to move, wanted to close the distance and take what it needed. But beneath the instinct was something stronger. The memory of being human. The knowledge of what those people's deaths would mean. To their families, to themselves, to Bella's own humanity that she was determined to maintain despite her transformation. She thought of Renesmee, of meeting her daughter, of being the mother she wanted to be, rather than a monster who killed innocents. And that thought gave her the anchor she needed. "I choose control," Bella said, and the words felt like a victory. "I choose not to hunt them." Edward's pride was palpable. "Then run. Run away from the scent. Don't test yourself beyond what you can handle. There's no shame in retreat when it means preserving lives." Bella ran, pushing her newborn speed to its limits, putting miles between herself and the tempting humans. Edward ran beside her, supporting without hovering, trusting her to maintain her control. By the time they stopped, the human scent had faded to nothing, and Bella felt triumph mixing with relief. "I did it," she said wonderingly. "I resisted human blood on my first day as a vampire." "Edward, is that—" "Unprecedented," Edward finished. "Bella, newborns don't resist human blood. They simply don't. The thirst is too strong, the instinct too powerful. What you just did shouldn't be possible." They returned to the house, and the family greeted Bella's return with expressions that showed they'd been listening, hearing her encounter with the humans, witnessing her choice. Carlyle's face held professional fascination mixed with paternal pride. Alice was practically glowing with excitement. Even Rosalie looked impressed, her usual cool reserve cracking to show approval. "You're ready," Rosalie said quietly, and the words held weight. "You're ready to meet Renesmee." Bella's unnecessary breath caught in her throat. "Where is she?" "Upstairs," Rosalie said. "Sleeping, but she'll wake soon. Come, meet your daughter properly." They climbed the stairs together, Bella moving with the controlled grace of her vampire form, hyper-aware of her strength and speed, and the potential danger she still represented despite her control. Rosalie led her to a bedroom that had been transformed into a nursery, though calling it a nursery felt inadequate for the elegant space filled with beautiful furniture and soft colors. And there, in a crib that looked more like a work of art than baby furniture, Renesmee slept. Bella approached slowly, memorizing every detail with her perfect vampire vision. Bronze curls that caught the light, skin that was pale but held warmth, blood moving beneath the surface. Features that blended Edward's sharp beauty with Bella's softer humanity into something entirely unique. She was beautiful beyond description, perfect in ways that transcended simple aesthetics into something that made Bella's still heart ache with overwhelming love. Renesmee's eyes opened, revealing chocolate brown irises exactly like Bella's human eyes had been. For a moment, mother and daughter simply looked at each other, recognition flowing between them despite Bella's transformed appearance. Then Renesmee smiled, a radiant expression of pure joy, and reached up with one small hand toward her mother's face. "She wants to show you something," Rosalie said softly. Her gift? She can project thoughts and memories through touch. Let her touch your face, Bella. Bella leaned down carefully, and Renesmee's warm palm pressed against her cool cheek. Immediately, images flooded Bella's mind. Memories from Renesmee's perspective. Bella's voice singing lullabies through the womb's barrier. Edward's face, close and loving, speaking gentle words. Rosali's arms, safe and protective. And beneath it all, love so intense it took Bella's breath away. Oh, Bella whispered, tears that wouldn't fall burning in her eyes. Oh, Renesmee, my beautiful girl, I love you so much. She gathered her daughter into her arms with infinite care, conscious of her newborn strength, terrified of hurting this fragile, perfect being. But Renesmee snuggled against her mother's chest with complete trust, her small body fitting perfectly in Bella's embrace, and Bella felt completion she'd never known. This was what she'd sacrificed for. This was why the transformation and the pain and the near death had been worth every moment. This was her daughter, and Bella would protect her with everything she'd become. The days after Bella's transformation blurred together in ways that felt both impossibly fast and perfectly clear. Each moment captured in her vampire memory with crystalline precision, while time itself seemed to move at an accelerated pace. Renesmee grew with speed that would have been alarming if Carlyle hadn't prepared them all for the possibility. His research into hybrid mythology suggesting that half-vampire children developed far more rapidly than humans. By the end of Bella's first week as a vampire, Renesmee had changed from a newborn into what appeared to be a 3-month-old infant. Her movements became more coordinated, her awareness more acute, her ability to communicate through her gift more sophisticated. She showed her parents images constantly, her observations of the world around her, her feelings and desires, her understanding of the people who loved her. It was communication that transcended language, more intimate and clear than words could ever be. Bella spent every possible moment with her daughter, making up for the time lost to transformation, learning the rhythms of motherhood while simultaneously adjusting to vampire existence. The combination should have been overwhelming, but Bella's unprecedented control made it possible. She could hold Renesmee without fear of crushing her, could respond to her needs without being distracted by thirst, could be the mother she always wanted to be despite being only days old as a vampire. Edward watched them together with an expression that held such love and wonder that it made Bella's still heart feel full despite its lack of beating. He'd spent Bella's transformation caring for Renesmee, learning her patterns and preferences, becoming the father he'd never imagined he could be. Now the three of them existed in a bubble of domestic happiness that felt miraculous after everything they'd endured to reach this point. The cottage appeared in Bella's life 2 weeks after her transformation, a gift from Edward that took her breath away despite no longer needing to breathe. He led her through the forest to a small clearing she'd never noticed before, and there stood the most perfect house Bella had ever seen. Small and elegant, built from stone and wood that seemed to grow organically from the forest around it, with windows that let in streams of filtered sunlight, and a porch that overlooked a meadow filled with wildflowers. "It's ours," Edward said quietly, watching Bella's face for her reaction. "I had it built while you were transforming. A place for our family, separate from the main house. Private space where we can be just the three of us when we want. Do you like it?" "Like it?" Bella whispered, taking in every detail with her vampire vision. "Edward, it's perfect. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Inside the cottage was furnished with careful attention to comfort and aesthetics. A large bed dominated the bedroom despite vampires not needing sleep. Edward's acknowledgement that some human habits were worth maintaining. A room for Renée, though she still slept mostly at the main house under Rosalie's watchful care. A music room with a piano where Edward could play for his family. A library with floor-to-ceiling shelves already filled with books. And everywhere, small touches that showed Edward's knowledge of what Bella loved. Soft fabrics, warm colors, spaces designed for intimacy and peace. They moved into the cottage gradually, spending more time there as Bella's confidence in her control grew, until it became their primary residence, with the main house serving as family gathering space. Bella loved the privacy, the ability to be wife and mother without audience, the sense of having carved out space in the world that was entirely theirs. But the main house remained central to their lives, particularly as Bella began training with the family to understand and develop her abilities. It was Carlyle who first suggested that Bella might have a gift, some supernatural ability beyond the standard vampire capabilities. "Most vampires develop nothing special," he explained, "but some manifested powers that reflected aspects of their human personality or strongest traits. Your mind was always private to Edward," Carlyle said thoughtfully, watching Bella interact with Renesmee. "He could never read your thoughts, even when he could hear everyone else. That suggests natural mental shielding, and transformation tends to amplify existing traits. It's possible you become a shield in more than just the passive sense." The discovery of Bella's active gift came accidentally during a family gathering at the main house. Kate from the Denali Coven had come to visit, bringing her sisters Tanya and Carmen to finally meet Renesmee and congratulate the family on surviving the impossible pregnancy. Kate possessed her own gift, the ability to generate electric shocks through her touch, a defensive capability that made her formidable despite her relatively young vampire age. Kate was demonstrating her ability on Emmett, who volunteered with his usual enthusiasm for anything that might be entertaining. The moment Kate touched his arm, Emmett collapsed with a shout, his body convulsing from the electrical charge she'd sent through his system. He recovered quickly, laughing and declaring it felt like being struck by lightning, and immediately volunteered for another round. But Bella felt something stir inside her as she watched, some instinct that hadn't existed before. When Kate reached for Emmett again, Bella thought no, and suddenly a shimmer of energy spread from her body to encompass Emmett. Kate's hand landed on his arm, and nothing happened. No shock, no collapse, just confusion on Kate's face and surprise on Emmett's. "Do it again," Edward said, his voice tight with excitement. "Bella, whatever you just did, try to do it again." Bella focused, reaching for that instinct, and felt the energy shield expand around her. She could visualize it somehow, could see in her mind how it spread from her body to protect others. When Kate tried to shock Emmett again, the shield held, deflecting Kate's electrical gift completely. "You're a shield," Carlyle said, wonder in his voice. "An active shield, Bella. You can extend protection to others, block mental and physical gifts from affecting those you want to protect. That's an incredibly rare and powerful ability." The training intensified after that discovery, Kate worked with Bella for hours each day, teaching her to extend and contract her shield at will, to wrap it around specific people or spread it wide to protect groups. It was exhausting work that required intense concentration, but Bella improved rapidly, her control over the shield growing stronger each day. Edward watched these training sessions with barely concealed satisfaction. "You can block me now," he said one evening as they walked back to the cottage. "I still can't read your thoughts, but now it's because you're actively shielding against me rather than just naturally private. Can you lower it? Let me in." Bella tried, relaxing the shield she hadn't fully realized she was maintaining, but Edward's expression showed continued frustration. "Still nothing," he admitted. "Your mind is still closed to me, Bella. I think your shield is more fundamental than most. It's not just a gift you activate. It's part of who you are." Strangely, this pleased Bella more than disappointing her. She'd always valued privacy, had always appreciated having thoughts that were entirely her own. Maintaining that even as a vampire felt right, felt like keeping some essential piece of herself despite the transformation. Renesmee continued to grow at her accelerated pace, reaching what appeared to be 1 year old when she was actually only 6 weeks old. She began walking during her second month of life, taking her first steps in the cottage with Bella and Edward both watching in amazement. She spoke her first words shortly after, simple things like Mama and Dada and Rose, though she continued to prefer communicating through her gift when she wanted to convey complex ideas. Her intelligence was remarkable, far beyond normal human child development. She understood concepts that should have been beyond her apparent age, asked questions that showed sophisticated reasoning, demonstrated memory and awareness that suggested her mind developed as quickly as her body. Carlyle theorized that her hybrid nature combined human growth patterns with vampire capabilities, creating something entirely new. Jacob's presence remained constant, though Bella still struggled with the imprint concept despite intellectually understanding it. He was never far from Renesmee, drawn to her by bonds he couldn't control or diminish, but his behavior was entirely appropriate. Protective rather than possessive, patient rather than demanding, treating Renesmee like the precious child she was, rather than anything inappropriate. "It's not romantic," Jacob explained one day when Bella's discomfort became too obvious to ignore. "Not now. Maybe not ever, if that's not what she wants when she's grown. The imprint makes me whatever she needs, Bella. Right now she needs a protector and a friend. That's what I am. That's what I'll always be, in whatever form she needs." Bella tried to accept it, tried to be grateful that Renesmee had Jacob's absolute devotion and protection, tried not to think too hard about the future implications. She focused instead on the present, on her daughter's childhood that was passing so quickly. It felt like watching time-lapse photography. Rosalie remained deeply involved in Renesmee's care, her fierce protectiveness never wavering. She taught Renesmee to interact gently with the world, despite her growing strength, showed her how to control her hybrid nature, loved her with an intensity that transformed her into someone softer than the bitter vampire she'd been. Bella was grateful for Rosalie's devotion, understood that Renesmee had given Rosalie something precious, a chance at motherhood she'd been denied by her transformation. The family settled into new rhythms that incorporated Renesmee into their eternal existence. Emmett played with her constantly, his size and strength making him the perfect playmate for a child who was stronger than human children and needed someone who could withstand her enthusiastic affection. Alice designed clothes for Renesmee's rapidly changing body, creating wardrobes that had to be replaced weekly as she grew. Jasper monitored emotional atmospheres, ensuring Renesmee felt safe and loved. Esme showered her with grandmotherly affection, and Carlisle documented every stage of her development with medical precision. They were a family in the truest sense, bound not just by vampire bonds, but by genuine love and mutual devotion. The main house filled with laughter and joy that had been absent during the dark days of Bella's pregnancy and transformation. Peace settled over them like a blessing, and they allowed themselves to believe that perhaps the danger had passed, that perhaps they could simply exist as a family without threat or complication. Bella's control remained exceptional, her ability to resist human blood becoming almost casual with practice. She hunted regularly with Edward, taking down mountain lions and bears with increasing skill, her newborn strength making her more than a match for any prey she pursued. The burning thirst never fully disappeared, but it became background noise rather than consuming need, manageable and controlled. 3 months after her transformation, Bella appeared essentially indistinguishable from the older vampires, except for her slight edge and strength. Her control exceeded what newborns typically achieved after years, and Carlisle theorized that her mental discipline, the same trait that had made her naturally shielded, allowed her to master her instincts faster than others could. Renesmee appeared roughly 3 years old by this point, though she was actually only 3 months old chronologically. Her growth was slowing slightly, the rapid pace of her first weeks moderating into something still fast but less alarming. Carlisle estimated she would reach full maturity around age 7, then stop aging entirely, her vampire heritage preserving her in eternal youth once she finished developing. The cottage became their sanctuary, the place where Bella and Edward could be simply husband and wife without the complications of family and responsibility. They spent long nights talking about everything and nothing, making up for the years Edward had denied himself physical intimacy, exploring their relationship as equals for the first time. Bella reveled in her strength, in her ability to match Edward without fear of breaking, in the freedom to express her love without restraint. "Are you happy?" Edward asked one night as they lay together in the cottage's bedroom. Renesmee sleeping peacefully in her room down the hall, the world quiet and perfect around them. "More than I ever imagined possible," Bella said honestly, her head on his chest where a heartbeat should be. "This is everything I wanted, Edward. You, Renesmee, forever stretching ahead. I wouldn't change anything." And in that moment, surrounded by peace and love and family, Bella truly believed they'd overcome every obstacle, that nothing could threaten the happiness they'd fought so hard to achieve. She had no idea how wrong she was, or how soon everything would change. Irina Denali stood at the edge of the forest, 300 yards from the Cullen house, watching a scene that made her blood run cold, despite the impossibility of that biological response. In the snow-covered clearing beyond, a small child played under the watchful eyes of Bella Cullen and Jacob Black, the three of them laughing together in the pale winter sunlight that rarely graced Forks with his presence. But it was the child who held Irina's attention, who made her entire body freeze with horror and recognition. The girl appeared perhaps 4 years old, with bronze curls that caught the light and movements that held grace no human child should possess. She moved too fast, jumped too high, displayed strength that allowed her to throw snowballs with force that would have injured a human adult. And her skin, even from this distance, held a faint luminescence that spoke of vampire heritage. An immortal child. The Cullens had created an immortal child. Irina's mind reeled with the implications, with memories of the last time she'd seen such abominations and the devastation they'd caused. It had been centuries ago, but the horror remained fresh in her memory. The unchanging children with their frozen minds and uncontrollable natures, the destruction they'd wrought on entire villages, the exposure they'd caused that had nearly revealed vampires to the human world. The Volturi had destroyed them all, executed every immortal child, and everyone who'd created or protected them, had made the creation of such creatures the one absolutely unforgivable crime in vampire law. And the Cullens, the family she'd considered friends and allies, had violated that most sacred prohibition. Irina's hands clenched at her sides as she watched the child, this impossible, illegal creature, laugh and play as if her very existence wasn't an affront of vampire law. The sound of that laughter carried across the snow, innocent and joyful and absolutely wrong. Immortal children were never innocent, no matter how they appeared. They were monsters wearing the faces of angels, incapable of growth or learning or the self-control that separated vampires from mindless killers. She'd witnessed the devastation personally, centuries ago in the frozen north where her coven had maintained territory. Another vampire had created an immortal child, a beautiful boy of perhaps 3 years who seemed sweet and loving until his tantrums began. The child had destroyed an entire village in a rage over some minor frustration, had killed every living thing within reach with strength that no toddler should possess, and no reasoning to stop himself. Exposure had been catastrophic, forcing every vampire in the region to flee before human armies could organize hunts. The Volturi had come then, swift and merciless. They destroyed the child and his creator, had executed everyone who'd known of the child's existence, and failed to report it immediately. Irina's own coven had barely escaped involvement, had proven their ignorance of the child's presence just barely in time to avoid destruction themselves. The memory of those days, the fear, the investigations, the absolute ruthlessness of Volturi justice had never faded despite centuries passing, and now the Cullens, who should have known better than anyone given Carlisle's history with the Volturi, had created exactly such a monster. Irina thought of her sister Laurent, killed by the shapeshifters less than a year ago, his death unavenged despite her demands for justice. The Cullens had sided with the wolves, had protected the young creatures who'd murdered Laurent, had chosen alliance with shapeshifters over loyalty to their own kind. She'd refused to attend Edward and Bella's wedding because of it, had declined to meet the Cullens' hybrid baby when her sisters Tanya and Kate had visited, had maintained distance from the family that had betrayed her grief. Laurent had been far from perfect. She knew that, accepted that his choices had often been questionable. He'd aligned with James and Victoria, had threatened the human girl Bella before she'd been transformed, had returned to Forks with intentions that probably weren't entirely peaceful, but he'd also been her companion for centuries, had been someone she'd cared for deeply despite his flaws, and his death at the hands of those animals deserved acknowledgement, if not revenge. The Cullens had offered neither. They'd explained the wolves' actions as defensive, had suggested Laurent's death was unfortunate but justified, had asked Irina to accept and move past her grief for the sake of their alliance with the shapeshifters, as if centuries of companionship could be dismissed so easily, as if her pain mattered less than their political relationships. And now this unforgivable crime that explains so much. The rushed wedding, Bella's transformation, the baby everyone whispered about but few had actually seen. It all made terrible sense now. They hadn't created a hybrid at all. They'd transformed a human child, had damned an innocent to eternal childhood, had created exactly the kind of monster that vampire law existed to prevent. The child threw another snowball, and Jacob caught it easily, tossing it back with careful control. Bella laughed at something the child said, or perhaps the child had communicated somehow without speaking, some gift that made her even more dangerous. Immortal children with gifts were the worst kind, their powers combined with their lack of control creating exponentially greater threat. Irina backed away from her vantage point, careful to move downwind so the Cullens wouldn't catch her scent and realize they'd been observed. She needed to leave, needed to report this to the only authority capable of dealing with such a crime. The Volturi, the ancient ones who enforced vampire law with absolute ruthlessness, who would destroy the immortal child and everyone who'd helped create or protect it. Part of Irina's heart ached at what she was about to do. She'd known Carlyle for centuries, had considered him friend and ally long before he'd established his unusual coven in the Americas. She'd respected his commitment to his vegetarian lifestyle, even though she and her sisters had never fully embraced it themselves. She'd admired Edward's devotion to Bella, had been genuinely happy when they'd found each other despite the complications of human-vampire relationships. But friendship couldn't excuse this. The law existed for good reason. Immortal children were too dangerous, too uncontrollable, too likely to expose their kind to humans. They had to be destroyed, and anyone who created them had to face consequences. There were no exceptions, no circumstances that justified violating this most fundamental prohibition. Irina began running south, her vampire speed carrying her away from Cullen territory with desperate urgency. She needed distance, needed to reach the airport in Seattle, where she could begin the long journey to Italy and Volterra, and the Volturi's seat of power. Every moment she delayed was another moment the immortal child existed, another moment of violation of the law she was sworn to uphold. She thought of Laurent again as she ran, of his death and the Cullens' refusal to seek justice on her behalf. Perhaps this was appropriate retribution, she told herself. Perhaps the Cullens deserved what was coming. They'd made their choice when they'd sided with wolves over vampires, when they'd created an immortal child despite knowing the law, when they'd put their own desires ahead of the safety of their entire kind. The ancient law against immortal children had been established for reasons that went beyond simple preference or arbitrary rulemaking. The history was taught to every vampire, passed down through centuries as warning and prohibition combined. In the medieval period, when vampire covens operated more openly in human society, some had believed transforming human children would create devoted companions who would never grow up or leave them. Eternal children to love and protect and keep forever young. The reality had been catastrophic. Children's minds froze at whatever age they'd been transformed, incapable of the maturity and self-control that adult vampires developed over years and centuries. A 3-year-old vampire possessed 3-year-old reasoning combined with supernatural strength and insatiable bloodlust. An impossible combination that led inevitably to disaster. The immortal children had killed indiscriminately, unable to understand consequences or control their feeding. Their tantrums became massacres. Their play became destruction. They'd slaughtered entire villages when frustrated, left trails of bodies that drew human attention, created exposure incidents that threatened all of vampire kind, and they couldn't be taught or controlled or reasoned with because their minds literally couldn't develop past the age of transformation. A 5-year-old vampire would be 5 years old forever. The same limited reasoning, the same inability to delay gratification, the same lack of impulse control, combined with a strength that could demolish buildings and speed that made them impossible to catch or contain. They were beloved by their creators, who saw only the sweet faces and innocent appearances, who refused to acknowledge the monsters their children had become. The Volturi had acted decisively when the exposure incidents became too frequent to ignore. They'd hunted down every immortal child in existence and destroyed them along with their creators, had made the creation of immortal children punishable by death for everyone involved, the transformer, the child, and anyone who knew of the child's existence and failed to report it. The law was absolute, with no exceptions and no mercy, because the threat was too great to allow any leniency. Irina had watched the Volturi work during those purges, had seen their efficiency and ruthlessness firsthand. They showed no emotion as they destroyed the children, no hesitation as they executed the vampires who'd created or protected them. Justice was swift and final, and the message was clear. This law would be enforced without exception, without mercy, without consideration of circumstances or intentions. And now she was bringing that justice to the Cullens, to Carlyle, who'd lived with the Volturi for decades and should have known better than anyone what he was risking. To Edward, who'd finally found happiness only to throw it away for an illegal child. To Bella, who'd barely lived a few months as a vampire before being destroyed for her family's crime. The ache in Irina's heart intensified, but she pushed it away. This was necessary. This was justice. This was the law. She reached Seattle as the sun set, her journey south taking only hours at vampire speed. The airport was busy with holiday travelers. Christmas was approaching, families gathering, the season of joy and celebration that made Irina's mission feel even darker. She purchased a ticket to Rome using false identification, settled into her seat on the overnight flight, and spent the long hours crossing the Atlantic thinking about what waited at journey's end. The Volturi would listen to her report, would evaluate her claims, would decide whether to investigate or act immediately. Aro would want to see for himself. He always did. His gift allowing him to read every thought and memory with a single touch, making him the perfect judge of truth versus deception. He would see through Irina's eyes what she'd witnessed, would understand the threat the immortal child represented, would act with the decisiveness that had kept vampire society stable for 3,000 years, and the Cullens would be destroyed. All of them, probably, because all of them must have known about the child, must have participated in creating or protecting it. Carlisle and Esme, Edward and Bella, Alice and Jasper, Rosalie and Emmett. The entire coven would face Volturi justice for their crime. Irina told herself she felt no guilt, that this was simply duty and law and necessity. But beneath her certainty lurked doubt she couldn't quite suppress. The child had seemed happy, loved, controlled in ways immortal children never were. But that was impossible, she reminded herself. Immortal children couldn't be controlled. Their very nature prevented it. She didn't know that Renesmee wasn't an immortal child at all, that she'd been born rather than transformed, that her mind grew and developed as rapidly as her body. She didn't know that Renesmee could control herself, could learn and reason and demonstrate exactly the kind of maturity immortal children could never achieve. She'd seen only what she expected to see. A child who moved too fast and appeared too young to be anything except the abomination that law forbade. The plane landed in Rome as dawn broke over the ancient city. Irina made her way to Volterra by rental car, driving the winding roads through Tuscany with mechanical precision. Her mind focused entirely on the meeting ahead. The city appeared on the horizon as the sun climbed higher. Ancient stone walls, medieval towers, the physical embodiment of vampire history and power. She parked outside the walls and entered the city on foot, making her way through narrow streets toward the inconspicuous entrance that led down to the Volturi Palace. The guards recognized her immediately. The Denali coven was known to the Volturi, respected as one of the few who maintained some semblance of the old ways, and admitted her without question. In the throne room deep beneath Volterra, Aro sat on his ornate chair, flanked by his brothers Marcus and Caius, the three ancient kings of vampire kind holding court as they had for millennia. The room was grand and cold, lit by torches that cast dancing shadows across stone walls, filled with the presence of the guard whose power made the Volturi invincible. Aro's papery skin and milky eyes gave him the appearance of something ancient and other, despite his refined manner. He smiled when Irina was announced, a gesture that held neither warmth nor threat, simply acknowledgement. "Irina, my dear," he said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "What brings you to Volterra? I trust your sisters are well." "They are well, Master Aro," Irina said, bowing her head respectfully. "But I come with disturbing news, a violation of our most sacred law." Aro's expression shifted to interest, his posture straightening slightly. "Indeed. Tell us, dear one, what violation have you witnessed?" Irina took an unnecessary breath, steadying herself for what came next. "The Cullens have created an immortal child." The silence that followed her words was absolute and heavy. Caius leaned forward in his throne, his expression darkening with fury. Marcus remained impassive, but his eyes focused on Irina with unusual attention. And Aro's smile widened, though whether from pleasure or anticipation was impossible to determine. "An immortal child," Aro repeated softly. "You're certain? The child wasn't simply a small vampire who appeared young. You saw evidence of transformation rather than birth." "The child was in sunlight," Irina said, her voice gaining strength from certainty. "Playing in the snow with Bella Cullen and the shapeshifter Jacob Black. She appeared perhaps 4 years old, no more. And she moved with vampire speed and strength, threw snowballs with force no human child could manage. Her, Skin held the luminescence of our kind. What else could she be? Ara was silent for a long moment, his mind clearly working through implications and possibilities. Then he extended his hand, an invitation for Irina to share her memories directly. "Show me," he said simply. Irina crossed the room and placed her hand in Ara's and felt the peculiar sensation of his gift accessing every thought she'd ever had. He would see her memories of the child, but also her grief over Laurent, her resentment toward the Cullens, her complicated motivations for this report. He would see everything and judge her accordingly. When Ara released her hand, his expression was thoughtful. "Most interesting," he murmured. "The timing is curious, is it not? Carlyle returns from his time with us knowing our laws intimately, establishes his coven, maintains contact with us for centuries, and then suddenly violates our most inviolable prohibition. It seems unlike him." "Desperation makes even the wisest foolish," Kaya said harshly. The human girl, Bella, was his son's mate. Perhaps Edward transformed a human child to please her, to give her a companion. The motivation matters not. The law is absolute. "Indeed it is," Ara agreed. His smile turned calculating, and Irina saw something flicker in his expression that went beyond simple justice. "We must investigate immediately. We shall travel to Forks ourselves, see this child with our own eyes, determine the truth of the matter. If Carlyle has indeed created an immortal child, the entire coven must answer for this crime." He turned to his guard, his voice taking on the tone of command. "Prepare for travel. We leave for America within the week, and we go in strength. If the Cullens choose to defend their crime, we must be ready to enforce our law absolutely." The guard dispersed prepared, and Irina stood in the throne room feeling the weight of what she'd set in motion. The Volturi would come to Forks. They would investigate the child, and if Irina was right, if the child truly was an immortal creation, the Cullens would be destroyed. She thought of Laurent one final time, of his death and her grief, and told herself this was justice. This was necessary. This was the law. Alice's scream shattered the peaceful afternoon like glass breaking, a sound of pure horror that brought the entire family running from different parts of the house. Bella found her in the living room, her small body rigid with terror, her eyes unfocused in the way that meant she was locked in vision, seeing futures that hadn't yet arrived but would, unless something changed. Edward reached Alice first, his hand on her shoulder, his gift allowing him to see what she saw through her thoughts. His face went white, his expression transforming from concern to absolute dread in the space of a heartbeat. "No," he whispered, the word barely audible. "No, that's not possible." "What is it?" Carlyle asked, his centuries of composure barely masking the fear in his voice. "Alice, what did you see?" Alice's vision released her suddenly, and she gasped as if surfacing from drowning. Her golden eyes found Bella's face, and the grief and terror in them made Bella's still heart clench with dread. "The Volturi," Alice said, her voice shaking. "They're coming, all of them. Aro, Caius, Marcus, the entire guard. They're coming to destroy us." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Each syllable weighted with implications that Bella's newborn vampire mind struggled to fully process. She knew about the Volturi from Edward's explanations and Carlyle's stories. The ancient vampire royalty who enforced their laws with absolute ruthlessness, whose power was so great that no coven could stand against them. She knew they were dangerous, knew they'd wanted to acquire Edward and Alice for their guard, knew their interest in the Cullen family had always been predatory beneath the veneer of civility. But she'd never imagined they would come here, would bring their full strength to Forks, would threaten the family she'd only just joined. Why? Bella asked, though part of her already knew the answer, already understood what had triggered this catastrophic response. What reason do they have? Irina, Edward said, his voice flat with barely controlled fury. She saw Renesmee in the clearing with you and Jacob. She saw a child who appeared too young, who moved too fast, who displayed vampire characteristics. And she reported to the Volturi that we've created an immortal child. The term meant nothing to Bella, but the reactions around her told her everything she needed to know. Rosalie's face went ashen. Emmett's usual humor vanished completely. Jasper's posture shifted into something military and defensive. Esme's hand went to her throat in a gesture of pure horror. And Carlyle closed his eyes as if the weight of centuries had suddenly become too much to bear. "What's an immortal child?" Bella asked, though she dreaded the answer. Carlyle opened his eyes and looked at her with profound sadness. A human child transformed into a vampire. They're absolutely forbidden, Bella. The Volturi destroyed them all centuries ago because they were too dangerous to allow to exist. Their minds freeze at whatever age they're transformed. A 3-year-old vampire has 3-year-old reasoning combined with supernatural strength and uncontrollable bloodlust. They can't learn, can't mature, can't develop the self-control that adult vampires achieve. They're disasters waiting to happen, exposure incidents incarnate. But Renesmee isn't, Bella started, and Carlyle cut her off with a gentle gesture. We know that. Renesmee was born, not transformed. She grows and learns and demonstrates maturity far beyond her apparent age. But Irina doesn't know that. She saw what she expected to see. A vampire child who shouldn't exist, and she reported it to the only authority she recognizes. Can't we explain? Bella asked, desperately. Show them Renesmee. Prove she's not what Irina thinks. Ara will want to see for himself, Edward said, his voice tight. He'll come, he'll investigate, and he'll touch Renesmee and read her thoughts and understand what she truly is. But that's not what I'm afraid of. Alice, show them the rest. Show them what you saw after the Volturi understand the truth. Alice's expression darkened further, if that was possible. They'll still try to destroy us. Not because Renesmee is an immortal child. They'll realize quickly that she's not. But because Aro wants our gifts. He's wanted Edward and me for his guard for nearly a century. Now he has Bella, whose shield makes her more valuable than both of us combined. He'll use any excuse to either acquire us or destroy us, and Irina's accusation gives him exactly the justification he needs. So we fight, Emmett said immediately, his massive hands clenching into fists. We don't just let them destroy us without defending ourselves. We can't fight them, Carlyle said quietly. Even if we wanted to, even if we were willing to abandon everything we believe about preserving life, we couldn't win. The Volturi guard numbers in the dozens, and many of them possess gifts that make them nearly invincible. Jane's pain illusion can incapacitate ancient vampires with a glance. Alec can deprive his victims of all sensation, leaving them helpless. Dimitri can track anyone anywhere, and those are just the ones with obvious combat applications. We'd be destroyed in minutes. Then what do we do? Rosalie asked, her arms wrapped protectively around herself, as if she could physically hold together against the threat bearing down on them. We can't fight and we can't run, so we just wait here for them to kill us. We gather witnesses, Carlyle said, and his voice took on the decisive tone that came from centuries of leadership. We find every vampire we know, every coven we have relationships with, every nomad who owes us favor or friendship. We bring them here to witness that Renesmee is not an immortal child, to testify that she's growing and learning and poses no threat. We surround ourselves with enough observers that the Volturi can't simply execute us without explaining themselves, without proving their accusations. We force them to investigate properly, to see the truth, to acknowledge that we've broken no law. Will that be enough? Bella asked, hearing the desperation in her own voice. I don't know, Carlyle admitted, but it's the only strategy that might work. The Volturi care about appearances, about maintaining their image as just enforcers of law rather than tyrants. If we have enough witnesses, enough respected vampires willing to testify on our behalf, they may decide the political cost of destroying us is too high. The family dispersed within hours, each member taking responsibility for contacting different covens and individuals scattered across the globe. Carlyle reached out to the Denali clan first, explaining the situation to Tanya and Kate and Carmen, asking them to come despite Irina's betrayal of their family. The Denali sisters agreed immediately, their loyalty to Carlyle outweighing their sister's actions, though their grief over Irina's role was palpable even through the phone line. Emmett and Rosalie traveled to contact nomads they'd encountered over decades of wandering, Mary and Randall, who owed them for past assistance, who agreed to come witness despite the danger of involving themselves in Volturi attention. Jasper used his military contacts, vampires he'd known during his time in the South, convincing them through a combination of friendship and strategic argument that witnessing this confrontation served everyone's interests. Alice and Edward worked together, using Alice's visions to identify which vampires would be most receptive to their requests, which relationships were strong enough to leverage into attendance. They contacted the Irish coven, Siobhan, Liam and Maggie, whose gifts and wisdom made them respected throughout vampire society. They reached out to the Egyptian coven, though Amun's initial reluctance required significant persuasion from Benjamin, whose gift of elemental manipulation made him one of the most powerful vampires in existence despite his relative youth. Bella remained at the house with Renesmee, both of them the center of this crisis, the reason the witnesses were needed and the evidence that would prove the Cullens' innocence. She spent the waiting time with her daughter, memorizing every detail of Renesmee's face and voice and gift, preparing herself for the possibility that these might be their last days together. Renesmee understood more than a child her apparent age should, her hybrid intelligence allowing her to grasp the danger they faced. She showed Bella images through her gift, memories of their family together, moments of happiness and love and safety. And beneath those images was a question, simple and devastating. Would they survive? I don't know, Bella admitted, unable to lie to her daughter. But we're going to try everything possible to protect you. You're not alone, Renesmee. You'll never be alone. Jacob remained constantly nearby, his imprint bond making it impossible for him to leave Renesmee's side when she faced danger. The rest of his pack, Seth and Leah, maintained vigilant watch over the property, their wolf senses alert for any threat that might arrive before the Volturi's main force. Even Sam's pack, despite their complicated relationship with the Cullens, sent word that they would monitor the situation, would not allow the Volturi to operate on Quileute land without awareness. The witnesses began arriving within days, covens and nomads converging on forks from across the world. Each arrival required careful management, territories negotiated, hunting grounds established. The delicate balance of having so many vampires in close proximity maintained through constant diplomacy and Jasper's emotional manipulation. The Denali clan came first, Tanya and Kate and Carmen arriving with grief and determination in equal measure. They met Renesmee immediately, saw the truth of what she was, and their testimonies became the foundation upon which other witnesses built their understanding. Tanya held Renesmee carefully, tears that couldn't fall making her golden eyes bright, and promised the child that she would tell the Volturi exactly what she'd witnessed. The Amazon Coven arrived next. 3 ancient female vampires who'd hunted together for over 1,000 years. Zafrina possessed a gift that rivaled Jane's for combat utility. She could project visions into others' minds, make them see whatever she wanted them to see, create illusions so complete that victims couldn't distinguish them from reality. She demonstrated for Bella, showing her a vision of tropical rainforest so vivid that Bella could smell the flowers and feel the humidity, and then explained that the same gift could show enemies visions of their worst fears, could incapacitate without physical touch. Senna and Kachiri, Zafrina's companions, brought wisdom and experience that made them valuable witnesses beyond any combat capability. They'd seen centuries of vampire politics, understood the Volturi's methods and motivations, could testify with authority about precedent and law that might sway Aro's calculations. The Irish Coven brought Siobhan, whose gift was so subtle many doubted it existed. She could influence outcomes simply by wanting them strongly enough, by visualizing success so completely that reality bent to accommodate her will. She couldn't control specific actions or guarantee results, but her presence shifted probabilities in ways that might make the difference between survival and destruction. She listened to Carlyle's explanation of the situation and immediately declared that the Volturi would see reason, would recognize Renesmee's nature, would leave the Cullens in peace. And somehow, her absolute certainty made it feel more possible. Maggie, young by vampire standards but gifted with the ability to detect lies, became crucial to their strategy. She could hear falsehood in anyone's words, could testify that the Cullens spoke truth about Renesmee's nature, could serve as living verification that would be difficult for even Aro to dismiss. Benjamin and the Egyptian Coven arrived with great reluctance, Amun clearly unhappy about involving himself in Volturi attention, but unable to refuse Carlyle's request given their history. Benjamin's gift made his presence valuable beyond measure. He could manipulate earth and wind and water and fire, could alter the battlefield itself if fighting became necessary. His demonstration in the Cullens' backyard left craters and scorched earth, evidence of power that might give even the Volturi pause. The Romanian Coven sent Vladimir and Stefan, ancient vampires who'd ruled territories before the Volturi's rise to power, who still carried bitter resentment about their deposing millennia ago. They came not out of love for the Cullens, but out of hatred for the Volturi, eager to witness anything that might diminish the ancient guard's authority. Their presence complicated the political situation. The Volturi would see their attendance as provocation, but Carlyle accepted their help regardless. Garrett arrived alone, a nomad who'd lived through the American Revolution and never lost his revolutionary spirit. He spoke passionately about freedom and choice, about the right of covens to exist without tyrannical oversight, about principles that seemed almost human in their idealism. His charisma and eloquence made him valuable as a spokesman, someone who could articulate why the witnesses stood with the Cullens in language that transcended simple loyalty. As each witness arrived, they met Renesmee, touched her warm hand, received her gift, and understood immediately what she was. The hybrid child showed them memories, her birth, her growth, her learning, her love for her family. And universally, the witnesses accepted what they saw, agreed to testify, committed themselves to standing with the Cullens when the Volturi arrived. The house filled with vampires, each bringing their own gifts and strengths and complications. Territory disputes erupted daily, hunting grounds became contested, and only Jasper's constant emotional manipulation kept outright violence from breaking out. But beneath the tensions, unity built from shared purpose. They would stand together. They would witness together. They would protect the hybrid child who represented something new in vampire existence. And they would hope it was enough when the Volturi's ancient power arrived to judge them all. Alice disappeared on a grey morning 3 weeks before the Volturi were scheduled to arrive, taking Jasper with her and leaving no explanation beyond a cryptic note hidden in Bella's room. The discovery sent shockwaves through the assembled witnesses and the Cullen family, transforming confusion into something darker, the sense of betrayal, of abandonment at the moment when unity mattered most. Bella found the note tucked inside a leather-bound copy of The Merchant of Venice, a book Alice knew Bella would eventually pick up during the long hours of waiting. The message was brief, written in Alice's distinctive flowing script. Gather as many witnesses as you can before the snow sticks to the ground. That's when they'll come. J. Jenks, Seattle. Keep that name to yourself. The name meant nothing to Bella initially, but the instruction was clear. This information was meant for her alone, not to be shared even with Edward or Carlyle. Alice had left them at their most vulnerable moment, had taken Jasper, whose gift kept the peace between so many territorial vampires, and had provided only this mysterious reference as explanation. Edward's pain at Alice's departure was palpable, his connection to his sister making her absence feel like losing a limb. "I can't hear her thoughts anymore," he said quietly, standing in the room she'd shared with Jasper, now empty of their possessions. "She's too far away, or blocking me somehow. I don't understand why she'd leave now, why she'd abandon us when we need her most." "She saw something," Carlyle said, though his voice held uncertainty rather than conviction. "Alice's visions guide her actions. If she left, it's because her sight showed her a reason. We have to trust that." But trust was difficult when the family felt fractured, when the witnesses whispered among themselves about the Cullens' cohesion, when even Rosalie expressed doubt about their chances without Alice's visions to guide their strategy. The Romanian coven in particular seized on Alice's departure as evidence that the Cullens knew they would lose. that even their seer had recognized the futility and fled to save herself. Bella waited 2 days before following Alice's instruction, until she could slip away from the house without drawing attention from Edward's constant vigilance. She told him she needed to hunt, needed time alone to process Alice's abandonment, and he reluctantly agreed to stay with Renesmee while Bella ventured into the forest. Once out of sight, she ran not toward hunting grounds, but toward Seattle, covering the distance in under 2 hours, her newborn speed making the journey almost effortless. J. Jenks operated from a discreet office in downtown Seattle, the kind of establishment that looked legitimate on the surface, while conducting business that existed in legal grey areas. The name on the door read Jason Jenks, attorney at law. But the man who greeted Bella when she used Alice's name as introduction was nervous in ways that suggested his legal practice was far from standard. "You're the one Alice sent," Jenks said, his heartbeat accelerating with fear despite Bella's attempt to appear non-threatening. "She said someone would come, that I should have the documents ready. But I didn't expect... I mean, you're like her, aren't you? Like them?" "Yes," Bella said simply, not bothering to hide what she was. Jenks clearly knew about vampires, had clearly done business with Alice before, and pretending otherwise would waste time they didn't have. "She left me your name. What documents?" Jenks produced a manila envelope with hands that shook slightly, laying it on his desk between them. False identification papers, birth certificates, social security cards, passports, everything needed for 2 people to establish completely new identities. She was very specific about the names and details. Jacob Wolf and his niece Vanessa Wolf. "Are these the names you wanted?" Bella's hands trembled as she opened the envelope and saw the documents inside. They were masterpieces of forgery, indistinguishable from legitimate papers, complete with photographs Alice must have provided. Jacob and Renesmee, both looking slightly older than their current appearances. The birth certificates listed Jacob as Renesmee's legal guardian. A story complete with fabricated family history and background details that would withstand all but the most thorough investigation. The implications hit Bella with devastating force. Alice had commissioned these documents before she disappeared, had planned for the Cullens' failure, had created an escape route for Renesmee that assumed everyone else would be destroyed. These papers were survival insurance for Bella's daughter, a way for Jacob to take Renesmee and run if the Volturi killed the rest of the family. "How much do I owe you?" Bella managed, though her voice came out strained. "Alice already paid," Jenks said quickly. "Paid extremely well, actually, with a significant bonus for expedited work and discretion. These documents don't exist in any of my records. As far as anyone knows, I never met you or Alice. That was part of the arrangement." Bella took the envelope and left the office, her mind reeling from the discovery. Alice had planned for their deaths, had accepted the possibility, the probability, that the Volturi would destroy them all. And she'd ensured that Renesmee would survive, that Jacob could take her daughter and disappear, that something would remain of their family even if everything else was lost. The knowledge was both heartbreaking and necessary. Bella understood the logic even as she hated the implications. If they lost, if the Volturi killed them all, Renesmee would need protection and identity and the ability to exist in the human world until she reached maturity. These documents provided exactly that, gave Jacob the tools to raise her in hiding, to keep her safe until she was old enough to protect herself. Bella returned to Forks and found Jacob alone in the forest, patrolling the perimeter as he did constantly now, his wolf form massive and russet in the fading afternoon light. He phased a human when he saw her, concern evident in his expression. "What's wrong? You smell like city and fear. What happened?" "I need you to promise me something," Bella said, and the words felt like tearing pieces from her own soul. "If we lose, if the Volturi destroy us, I need you to take Renesmee and run. Take her far away, keep her hidden, raise her safely until she's grown enough to protect herself." Jacob's face hardened with rejection. "I'm not running, Bella. I'm not leaving you and Edward and everyone else to die while I save myself and Renesmee. We fight together or we die together." "You have to run," Bella insisted, pulling the envelope from where she'd hidden it and showing Jacob the documents. "Alice made these before she left. New identities for both of you. Everything you'd need to disappear completely. Jacob, please. I'm not asking you to abandon us by choice. I'm asking you to save my daughter if there's no other option. Can you do that?" Jacob took the documents with hands that shook, his expression transforming from stubborn refusal to anguished acceptance as he understood what Bella was asking. "You want me to live knowing I let you die. You want me to spend however long it takes raising Renesmee while carrying the knowledge that I survived and you didn't." "I want my daughter to live," Bella said, and tears that couldn't fall burned in her eyes. "That's all I want, Jacob. If we survive this, if we somehow convince the Volturi to leave us in peace, these documents become meaningless and we'll burn them. But if we don't survive, if everything goes wrong, then you run. You take Renesmee and you use these papers and you keep her safe. Promise me." In the silent stretch between them, heavy with grief and terrible necessity, finally, Jacob nodded, the movement small and defeated. "I promise. But Bella, I'll spend the rest of my life hating myself for it. Better you live hating yourself than die with us when you could have saved her," Bella said quietly. She handed him the envelope, watched him tuck it carefully inside his jacket, and felt something break inside her chest at the finality of the gesture. She returned to the cottage that night and wrote letters to Charlie and Renee. Explanations that explained nothing but expressed everything she needed to say. She told them she loved them, that every choice she'd made had been for love, that her life had been shorter than most, but fuller than she'd ever imagined possible. She wrote about happiness and gratitude and the impossible miracle of Renesmee, and she sealed the letters in envelopes marked to be delivered only if she didn't survive the coming confrontation. Edward found her at the desk, the letters arranged before her, tears tracking down her cheeks, though vampires couldn't cry. He said nothing, simply gathered her into his arms and held her while she shook with silent sobs, his own grief matching hers measure for measure. "Alice saw this possibility," Bella said against his shoulder. "She saw us losing, saw all of us dying, and she made plans for Renesmee's survival. That's why she left, isn't it? She's preparing something, some strategy we can't know about because the Volturi would see it in our thoughts if Aro touches us." "Probably," Edward agreed quietly. "Alice's visions work around blind spots, things she can't see directly, but can infer from what she does see. The werewolves block her sight, and so does Renesmee. Maybe she saw something involving them, some possibility that only works if we don't know about it. Or maybe she's searching for something, some evidence or witness that will change the outcome. "Do you think we'll survive?" Bella asked, the question she'd been afraid to voice. Edward was quiet for a long moment, his hand stroking her hair with gentle repetition. "I think we have a chance. The witnesses are impressive, more than I thought Carlyle could gather. Benjamin's gift alone might give the Volturi pause. And your shield, Bella, if you can extend it to protect all of us. If you can block Jane and Alec, we have capabilities the Volturi won't expect. So yes, I think we have a chance. But I'm also prepared for the possibility that we don't." The training intensified as the deadline approached. Bella working with Kate for hours each day to strengthen and expand her shield. She learned to wrap it around multiple people simultaneously, to hold it steady under pressure, to snap it into place with thought rather than requiring conscious effort. Kate's electric shocks provided perfect testing. If Bella's shield held, Kate's gift couldn't penetrate. If the shield faltered, the painful consequences taught Bella to maintain focus. By the end of the third week, Bella could protect the entire Cullen family plus several witnesses. Her shield stretched thin, but holding steady. Her control sufficient to maintain it, even under Kate's sustained assault. It wasn't perfect. She tired if she held it too long, and splitting her focus between too many people caused it to weaken. But it was substantial, formidable, a defensive capability the Volturi wouldn't anticipate. Eleazar, Kate's mate, and a former member of the Volturi Guard, worked with Bella to understand the full scope of her gift. His own ability allowed him to identify others' talents, to see the supernatural capabilities that manifested in transformed vampires. When he analyzed Bella's shield, his expression showed something between awe and concern. "Your gift is extraordinary," Eleazar said quietly. "More powerful than any mental shield I've encountered, including Renato, who guards Aro himself. But it's also purely defensive. You can protect but not attack, can block but not harm. Against the Volturi Guard, that may not be enough." "It has to be enough," Bella said. "It's what I have. It's what I can do." Renesmee grew throughout these preparations, reaching what appeared to be 6 or 7 years old, despite being only months old chronologically. Her growth was slowing finally, the accelerated development moderating towards something more sustainable. Carlyle estimated she would reach full maturity within another year, then stop aging entirely, her vampire heritage preserving her in eternal youth once she finished developing. The child understood everything happening around her, her intelligence and awareness far exceeding her apparent age. She showed her parents images through her gift, visions of the family together, memories of happiness, and beneath it all a question she couldn't quite articulate, but Bella understood perfectly. Would they survive? Would their family remain intact? Or would the Volturi tear them apart? "We're going to fight for you," Bella told her daughter, holding her close in the cottage bedroom while Edward played piano in the next room. The music haunting and beautiful and full of farewell. "We're going to do everything possible to protect you, to keep you safe, to show the Volturi that you're not what they fear. And if somehow that's not enough, Jacob will take care of you. You'll never be alone, Renesmee. No matter what happens, you'll never be alone." Charlie visited during the final week, his presence complicated by his partial knowledge of the supernatural world. He knew Bella was different now, understood on some level that she'd become something other than human, but the full truth remained hidden behind careful explanations and misdirection. He met Renesmee and accepted the story about rapid growth due to rare genetic conditions, his love for his granddaughter overriding his questions about impossibility. Sue Clearwater helped manage Charlie's exposure to the truth, her own knowledge as a Quileute elder, allowing her to navigate the boundary between human ignorance and supernatural awareness. She'd become important to Charlie over the past months, her presence in his life giving him stability and companionship that made Bella's transformation easier for him to accept. "You happy?" Charlie asked Bella during a quiet moment, while Renesmee played with Edward in the snow outside the cottage. "Even with everything that's changed, you're happy?" "I'm happy," Bella said, meaning it absolutely despite the terror of what approached. "This life, this family, Renesmee, it's everything I wanted, Dad. I wouldn't change any of it." Charlie nodded, his eyes suspiciously wet, and pulled Bella into a hug that she returned with careful control of her strength. "That's all I needed to know, Bells. That's all that matters." The witnesses continued their own preparations, strategies discussed and discarded, alliances solidified through shared purpose, and Jasper's emotional manipulation despite his absence. They knew their role: stand witness, testify to truth, present united front that might make the Volturi reconsider destruction. They weren't an army preparing for battle, Carlyle insisted repeatedly. They were observers, truth-tellers, living evidence that would speak louder than any defense. But beneath the diplomatic strategy, everyone understood the possibility of violence. Benjamin practiced his elemental manipulation in the forest, leaving scorched earth and flooded clearings. Zafrina demonstrated her illusions, showing how she could blind entire groups or show them visions of their worst fears. Garrett sharpened his rhetorical skills, preparing passionate speeches about freedom and tyranny. The Romanian coven spoke quietly about old grudges and ancient battles, their hatred for the Volturi barely concealed beneath their cooperation. And Bella trained with her shield, extending and contracting it, learning its limits and capabilities, preparing for the moment when she might be all that stood between her family and destruction. The snow began falling in earnest during the first week of December, heavy flakes that accumulated rapidly, covering the ground in white that stuck and held. Alice's prediction coming true. The Volturi would arrive soon, drawn by Irina's accusation and Aro's ambition, coming to judge them all. The family gathered in the cottage on the last night before the confrontation. Just Bella and Edward and Renesmee, their last hours of peace before everything changed. Edward played piano, compositions he'd written over his century of existence, and new pieces created specifically for this moment. Bella held Renesmee close, memorizing the weight of her daughter in her arms, the warmth of her skin, the love that made everything else worthwhile. "No matter what happens tomorrow," Edward said quietly, his hands stilling on the keys, "this was worth it. You were worth it, Bella. Renesmee was worth it. I would make every choice again to reach this moment." "So would I," Bella whispered. "Every moment, every sacrifice, every danger, all of it was worth this." They sat together in the cottage while snow fell outside, a family bound by love and choice and determination to survive, waiting for dawn and the ancient judgment that approached with terrible inevitability. The Volturi arrived at noon, on a day when the sky hung low and grey above the snow-covered field, their numbers so vast that the forest seemed to darken with their presence before they even became visible. Bella stood in the clearing with her family and witnesses arranged behind her. Renesmee held securely in her arms, Edward at her side, and felt her still heart clench with terror at the magnitude of what approached. They came through the trees like a dark tide, dozens upon dozens of vampires moving with synchronized precision that spoke of centuries fighting together as a coordinated unit. The Volturi Guard wore dark cloaks that seemed to absorb light, their faces pale and beautiful and absolutely inhuman in their perfection. At their center walked three figures who commanded attention simply by existing. The ancient kings, Aro and Marcus and Caius, who had ruled vampire kind for 3,000 years with power that had never been successfully challenged. Aro led the formation, his papery skin and milky eyes marking him as something older than memory, his smile pleasant and terrifying in equal measure. Beside him walked Marcus, whose expression held the profound indifference of someone who'd lived too long and cared too little, whose gift of seeing relationships made him valuable despite his apathy. And Caius, whose face held open fury barely restrained by millennia of practice, whose hatred for anything that threatened vampire law was legendary throughout their kind. Behind the kings came the guard, and Bella recognized faces from Edward's descriptions even though she'd never met them. Jane, small and angelic with eyes that held cruelty beyond her apparent age, whose gift of pain illusion had broken countless vampires into submission. Alec, Jane's twin, whose sensory deprivation could reduce ancient warriors to helpless victims floating in absolute nothingness. Dimitri, the greatest tracker, whose ability to find anyone, anywhere made escape from Volturi justice impossible. Felix, massive and powerful, whose physical strength exceeded even Emmett's despite lacking any supernatural gift beyond standard vampire capabilities. And so many more, gifts layered upon gifts, creating a force that seemed invincible by any measure. Chelsea, who could manipulate emotional bonds and sever loyalties with a touch. Renata, whose shield protected Aro so completely that attacking him was essentially impossible. Corinne, whose gift made those around her content and placid useful for keeping the Volturi's collected vampires docile. The wives, Sulpicia and Athenodora, beautiful and ornamental and terrifying in their own right, simply by association with such power. Among the Volturi ranks, Bella spotted Irina, her face holding guilt and horror as she saw Renesmee clearly for the first time, understanding too late that what she'd reported wasn't what she'd actually witnessed. But it was too late for regrets now, too late to take back the accusation that had brought this ancient judgment to the Cullens' doorstep. The Cullen witnesses stood firm behind their hosts, impressive in their own right, but so vastly outnumbered that the disparity was almost comical. 38 witnesses against a guard that numbered well over 50, with the Volturi's gifts far more combat-oriented than most of what the Cullens had gathered. But they stood nonetheless, united by commitment to truth and whatever loyalty or principle had brought them here. The two forces faced each other across the snow-covered field, vampire stillness making the scene feel frozen in time, as if the world itself held its breath, waiting to see which side would move first. The only sound was the wind through the trees and Renesmee's heartbeat, that single rhythm of life amid so much eternal death. Carlyle stepped forward, his centuries of diplomacy evident in every measured movement. "Aro, old friend," he said, his voice carrying across the distance. "You've travelled far. I hope we can resolve this matter peacefully, as we've always managed in the past." Aro's smile widened, though it held no warmth. "Dear Carlyle, always the diplomat, always seeking peaceful resolution. But I'm afraid the accusation we've received is too serious to ignore. An immortal child, Carlyle, the one crime we cannot overlook, the one law that admits no exception. Surely you understand why we had to investigate personally." "I understand completely," Carlyle said calmly, "and I welcome your investigation. As you'll see very quickly, the accusation is based on misunderstanding. Renesmee is not an immortal child. She was born, not transformed. She's a hybrid of vampire and human, something unprecedented in our history." "Unprecedented," Caius repeated, his voice dripping with contempt, "and therefore dangerous. Unknown quantities pose risks we cannot calculate, Carlyle. If she's not an immortal child, then what is she? What will she become? How do we know she won't expose us all?" "You could see for yourself," Edward said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "Aro, your gift allows you to read thoughts and memories with a touch. Touch Renesmee. See what she is through her own mind. See that she grows and learns and demonstrates maturity that immortal children could never achieve." Aro's expression showed interest, calculation working behind his milky eyes, a reasonable suggestion. "Yes, I would very much like to meet this unprecedented child. Will you bring her to me, Edward? Allow me to see the truth of her nature." Edward looked at Bella, a question in his golden eyes, and Bella nodded despite the fear coursing through her. They had to show the Volturi the truth, had to demonstrate that Renesmee posed no threat. She crossed the field slowly, Edward at her side, Renesmee held carefully in her arms, walking toward the ancient king whose touch could reveal every thought she'd ever had. Bella felt her shield snap into place instinctively, wrapping around her and Edward and Renesmee, protecting them from any gifts the Volturi might attempt. She saw Jane's eyes narrow, saw Alec's attention focus on them, but neither twin's gift penetrated the invisible barrier Bella maintained. Small satisfaction in knowing her shield worked, that she could protect her family even here surrounded by such overwhelming force. They stopped 10 feet from Aro, close enough for the ancient vampire to see Renesmee clearly, but maintaining distance that allowed for retreat if necessary. Renesmee looked at Aro with her chocolate brown eyes, Bella's eyes from her human life, and showed no fear despite facing someone whose mere presence terrified ancient vampires. "Hello, little one," Aro said softly, his voice carrying genuine curiosity beneath the threat. "Will you show me? Will you let me see your thoughts?" Renesmee reached out her small hand, palm forward in the gesture that meant she wanted to share her gift. Aro extended his own papery hand, and when they touched, Bella saw his expression transform from calculation to absolute wonder. The connection lasted perhaps 30 seconds, Aro's gift reading every thought Renesmee had ever had, while Renesmee's gift showed him selected memories from her perspective. When they separated, Aro stood motionless for a long moment, processing what he'd witnessed. "Extraordinary," he finally said, his voice holding awe. "She's not an immortal child at all. She was born, grew in Bella's womb, emerged through birth rather than transformation. Her mind develops, learns, matures. She showed me memories from mere days ago that demonstrate reasoning and understanding far beyond her apparent age. And her gift, she can show her thoughts to others through touch. Remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. So you see, the accusation was false, Carlyle said, relief evident despite his attempts at maintaining diplomatic neutrality. Renesmee is not what Irina believed. She's not a violation of our laws. Not an immortal child, certainly, Aro agreed. But Caius raises valid concerns. What is she, if not that? What will she become? Her father is vampire. Her mother was human during conception. She's something we've never encountered, never catalogued, never understood. How do we know she's safe? How do we know she won't expose us as she grows? We have proof, Carlyle said, and gestured toward the witnesses. We've gathered testimony from those who've spent time with Renesmee, who've seen her development, who can speak to her nature and capabilities. And we have more than that. We have another hybrid, older than Renesmee, who can testify to what she'll become. This was a lie, but delivered with such confidence that even Bella almost believed it. Carlyle was stalling, buying time, hoping that whatever Alice had planned would arrive before the Volturi lost patience. But Bella saw the calculation in Aro's expression, saw him weighing the possibilities, considering whether this mysterious other hybrid actually existed or was simply diplomatic fiction. Another hybrid, Aro repeated slowly. How fascinating. I would very much like to meet this individual. Where might they be? Traveling here, Carlyle said smoothly. We've sent for them naturally, knowing you would want complete evidence before making any decisions. Surely you can wait a few hours to meet someone who proves Renesmee's ultimate safety. Caius stepped forward, his fury barely contained. This is delay tactics, Aro. The Cullens are stalling, hoping we'll lose patience and leave before enforcing our laws. The child may not be an immortal creation, but she's still dangerous. She's still unknown. And these witnesses, he gestured at the assembled vampires behind the Cullens. They've been gathered as army, not observers. The Cullens are preparing for war, not investigation. We gathered witnesses to testify to truth, Carlyle corrected firmly. Not to fight you, Aro. Never to fight you. We want only to demonstrate that Renesmee poses no threat, that she should be allowed to exist peacefully with her family. The standoff stretched, tension building like a physical pressure in the air between the two forces. Bella maintained her shield carefully, keeping it wrapped around her family and key witnesses, ready to expand it if Jane or Alec attempted to attack. She could feel the strain of holding it steady, the mental effort required to protect so many people simultaneously, but determination kept her focused. Edward's hand found hers, cold fingers interlocking with her equally cold ones, their connection the only comfort in this moment of terrible uncertainty. Renesmee remained quiet in Bella's other arm, her warm weight a reminder of why they stood here, why they faced impossible odds, why surrender wasn't an option, no matter how overwhelming the Volturi's force appeared. I propose a compromise, Aro said finally, his tone deceptively pleasant. We wait for this other hybrid to arrive, hear their testimony, gather complete evidence before making final decisions. But in the meantime, I would like to meet your witnesses, hear their observations, understand what they've seen during their time with the child. Surely that's reasonable. Completely reasonable, Carlyle agreed, though his posture remained tense. Our witnesses are prepared to testify truthfully about everything they've observed. Aro's smile widened, and Bella saw something predatory in the expression, something that went beyond simple investigation into territory that felt like hunting. Excellent. Then let us begin. And Carlyle, I would very much like to meet your son's mate properly. Bella, isn't it? The human who captured Edward's heart. I've heard so much about you, and now that you're transformed, I'm quite curious about your capabilities. The threat was barely veiled, Aro's interest in Bella's gift obvious despite his pleasant tone. He wanted her for his guard, wanted to possess the shield that made her invaluable in combat, wanted to acquire yet another talented vampire for his collection. And if he couldn't acquire her willingly, he would find excuse to destroy her family and take her by force. Bella met Aro's milky gaze directly, refusing to show the fear coursing through her. I'm here, she said quietly. I'm not going anywhere, and I'll protect my family with everything I have. Of that, Aro said softly, I have no doubt whatsoever. The witnesses began their testimonies one by one, each vampire approaching to speak with Aro and the other kings, sharing their observations of Renesmee and their understanding of her nature. Eleazar spoke first, his authority as former Volturi Guard member, lending weight to his words. He explained Renesmee's gift, her growth pattern, her demonstrated control and reasoning. He testified that she posed no threat to vampire secrecy, that her hybrid nature made her something entirely new but not dangerous. The Denali sisters followed, Tanya and Kate Carmen, each sharing their experiences with Renesmee, their voices breaking with emotion as they described the child's innocence and capability. They testified that she could be taught, could learn, could exercise self-control that immortal children never demonstrated. And beneath their testimony was grief for Irina, for their sister, whose mistake had brought this judgment upon them all. Benjamin demonstrated his elemental gift at Aro's request, manipulating earth and wind and water with casual power that made even the Volturi Guard shift uneasily. His testimony about Renesmee was brief but emphatic. The child was no threat, posed no danger, should be left in peace with her family. His mate Tia stood beside him, silent support for his declaration. Zafrina showed Aro visions through her gift, demonstrating the full scope of her ability to manipulate perception. She testified that Renesmee's own gift was similar, the ability to share thoughts and memories through touch, but that the child used it only gently, only when invited, showing control that spoke to her mature mind despite her young appearance. Garrett spoke with passionate eloquence about freedom and choice, about the right of individuals to exist without tyrannical oversight, about principles that transcended vampire politics. His revolutionary rhetoric made Caius's expression darken with fury, but Aro listened with apparent interest, his calculating mind assessing whether Garrett's presence represented a political threat beyond simple testimony. The Romanian Coven's testimony was barely civil, Vladimir and Stefan making their hatred for the Volturi obvious even as they vouched for Renesmee's safety. They spoke of ancient times before the Volturi's rule, of different approaches to vampire governance, of freedom that had existed before Aro's consolidation of power. Their words were calculated provocation, reminders that the Volturi's authority wasn't inevitable or eternal. Through it all, Aro listened with his pleasant smile and calculating eyes, his mind clearly working through possibilities and strategies. He touched several witnesses, reading their thoughts directly, confirming that their testimony matched their true beliefs. And each time, he learned not just about Renesmee, but about the witnesses themselves, cataloguing their gifts and capabilities with the eye of someone building a mental inventory of valuable resources. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, winter making the daylight hours brief, and still no sign of Alice or the hybrid she'd supposedly summoned. Bella felt hope beginning to crack, desperation seeping through her determination. If Alice didn't arrive soon, if they couldn't produce the evidence Carlyle had promised, the Volturi would lose patience and enforce whatever judgments they'd already decided upon. And then, at the moment when all seemed lost, movement at the forest edge drew every vampire's attention. Two figures emerged from the trees, running at supernatural speed toward the assembled forces. Alice had returned, and she wasn't alone. Alice burst into the clearing with Jasper at her side, moving at speeds that blurred even to vampire eyes, her small form radiating urgency that made every witness tense with anticipation. Behind them came two figures Bella had never seen before. A young man, who appeared perhaps 18 years old, and an older woman whose face held centuries of experience despite her youthful appearance. Both possessed the distinctive pale beauty of vampires, but the young man also carried warmth that spoke of something more, something that made Bella's breath catch with recognition. Another hybrid. Alice had actually found another hybrid. Aro's expression transformed from calculated patience to genuine fascination, his milky eyes fixing on the newcomers with intensity that suggested he'd forgotten everything else in his desire to examine this new evidence. "How remarkable," he said softly, his voice carrying across the silent field. "Alice, my dear, you've been busy during your absence. Will you introduce us to your companions?" Alice moved directly toward Aro, with the confidence of someone who'd seen this moment in her visions and knew exactly how it needed to unfold. Jasper remained close beside her, his gift working overtime to manage the emotional turbulence of so many vampires gathered in hostile confrontation. The two strangers followed more cautiously, the young man's eyes scanning the assembled Volturi guard with wariness that suggested he understood exactly what power they represented. "This is Nahuel," Alice said, gesturing to the young man. "And his Aunt Helen. They've traveled from South America to testify about what Renesmee will become, to prove that hybrids pose no threat to our secrecy or our kind." Nahuel stepped forward, his posture respectful but not subservient, his eyes meeting Aro's directly, despite the ancient vampire's overwhelming presence. He was beautiful in ways that transcended simple vampire aesthetics, his features holding a warmth and humanity that pure vampires lacked. His skin held faint color, subtle warmth that suggested blood still moved through his veins in ways that vampire physiology didn't allow. "How old are you?" Aro asked, fascination evident in every word. 150 years, Nahuel replied, his voice carrying a slight accent that spoke of Spanish as his first language. "I was born in 1875, in the forests of what is now Chile. My father was a vampire named Joan. My mother was human. She died giving birth to me, as human mothers of hybrids typically do. My Aunt Wayland transformed herself to care for me, raised me through childhood despite being a newborn vampire herself. The information hung in the air, each detail more significant than the last. 150 years. The hybrid had lived 150 years, which meant he'd survived well past whatever maturity Renesmee would reach, which meant the fears about hybrids being uncontrollable or short-lived were demonstrably false. Aro moved toward Nahuel with the focused intensity of someone encountering something unprecedented and invaluable. "May I?" he asked, extending his papery hand in request for the touch that would allow his gift to read every thought Nahuel had ever experienced. Nahuel placed his hand in Aro's without hesitation, standing still while the ancient vampire's gift accessed his entire existence. The connection lasted longer than it had with Renesmee, Aro clearly taking time to examine 150 years of memories and experiences, cataloguing everything about what a hybrid became and represented. When Aro finally released Nahuel's hand, his expression held wonder mixed with calculation. "Extraordinary," he said, the word becoming his refrain for this entire encounter. "You reached full maturity at approximately 7 years of age, then stopped." "Aging entirely. Your body is warm, your heart beats, your blood flows, but you possess vampire strength and speed and senses. You can survive on either blood or human food, though you prefer blood. You have a gift. You can make yourself appear more attractive to others, a mild form of mental manipulation. And you are not venomous, cannot transform humans through your bite." "All true," Nahuel confirmed. "I am living proof that hybrids are not dangerous, that we can control ourselves, that we pose no threat to vampire secrecy. I've lived among humans for 150 years without exposing what I am. I've never killed recklessly, never drawn attention that threatened our kind. And I'm not unique. My father created other hybrids before me. We exist, we survive, we live peacefully." "Your father created other hybrids," Caius interjected, his voice sharp with accusation. "He deliberately impregnated human women, allowed them to die in childbirth, created these mixed creatures. That sounds remarkably like experimenting with our laws, testing boundaries that should not be tested. My father is not here to answer for his choices," Nahuel said carefully. "But his experiments prove that hybrids are viable, stable, capable of integration into both vampire and human society. We are not abominations. We are simply something different, something new." Highland stepped forward, her face holding grief that 150 years hadn't diminished. "I was human when my sister died giving birth to Nahuel," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of terrible memory. "I watched her suffer, watched the pregnancy destroy her body, watched her give everything to bring this child into the world. And then I made the choice to transform myself, to become vampire so I could raise my nephew, so I could protect him from a world that would not understand what he was." "You transformed yourself." Marcus spoke for the first time, his usual apathy cracking slightly with interest. "Vampire venom doesn't typically work that way. Transformations require someone to bite, to inject the venom deliberately. How did you accomplish self-transformation?" "I was bitten during an attack years before my sister's pregnancy," Hulin explained. "The vampire who attacked me was interrupted before he could drain me completely. He fled, leaving me with venom in my system, but not enough to complete transformation. The venom remained dormant for years, changing me in small ways, but not enough to make me fully vampire. When my sister died and I needed to care for Nahuel, I allowed the transformation to complete by refusing to fight it any longer. The dormant venom finished its work, and I became what I am now. The explanation was medically fascinating. Bella could see Carlyle processing the implications, even while maintaining his diplomatic focus. But the crucial information was Nawal himself, living proof that Renesmee would reach maturity, would stop aging, would live forever without becoming a threat or an abomination. Aro turned his attention back to Nawal, his calculating mind clearly working through ramifications and possibilities. You said your father created other hybrids. How many? Where are they? Can they also testify to their stability and safety? I have 2 sisters, Nawal said. Both younger than me, both also stable and safe. They live quietly in South America, avoiding attention from either vampire or human authorities. As for my father, he continues his experiments, though I have no contact with him. His methods are his own, and I do not speak for his choices. This is irrelevant, Kaya said harshly, his patience clearly exhausted. So hybrids can survive to maturity, so they can control themselves adequately. That doesn't address the fundamental problem. They shouldn't exist at all. The mixing of human and vampire is unnatural, creates complications we cannot predict or control. The child may be stable now, but what happens in decades or centuries? What if she decides to create more hybrids herself? What if this becomes a trend? Vampires deliberately impregnating humans to create these mixed creatures? Then we legislate appropriately, Aro said mildly, though his tone held layers of meaning. If hybrids are to be permitted, we establish guidelines for their creation and raising. We ensure they're taught our laws, monitored for compliance, integrated into our society with appropriate oversight. We don't destroy them simply because they're unprecedented. The statement hung in the air, and Bella felt hope kindle in her chest despite her determination not to trust Aro's apparent reasonableness. He was playing some deeper game, calculating advantages she couldn't see, working toward goals that went beyond simple justice. But if his calculations led him to allow Renesmee to live, she would accept his motivations regardless of how impure they might be. You would permit this? Caius demanded, turning on Aro with barely concealed fury. You would allow these hybrids to exist despite every principle of purity and separation we've maintained for millennia. I would permit what doesn't threaten us, Aro said calmly. The child is not an immortal creation. She poses no immediate threat to our secrecy. She will mature and stabilize according to Nahuel's testimony. And destroying her now would create complications. He gestured at the assembled witnesses. That might prove more troublesome than simply allowing her to exist under appropriate monitoring. What kind of monitoring? Edward asked, his voice tight with suspicion. Periodic visits, Aro said smoothly. Perhaps every decade or so, someone from our guard checking on Renesmee's development, ensuring she maintains control and discretion, verifying that she causes no exposure incidents. Nothing intrusive, simply reasonable oversight to ensure our laws are being followed. It was a compromise that felt like a trap, ongoing Volturi, involvement in their lives creating perpetual vulnerability, but it was also survival, a way forward that didn't end with everyone Bella loved destroyed in the snow. She looked at Edward, saw the same calculation in his golden eyes, the same desperate weighing of terrible options. That seems reasonable, Carlyle said carefully, his diplomatic training evident in every measured word. We would welcome periodic visits from your guard, would cooperate fully with any monitoring you deem necessary. Renesmee will be taught your laws, will understand the importance of secrecy, will live as responsibly as any vampire. Aro smiled, and the expression held satisfaction that went beyond simple resolution of a legal question. Excellent. Then I believe we can consider this matter. No, Kais interrupted, his voice hard as stone. Aro, you cannot simply accept this. The Cullens have violated the spirit of our laws, even if not the letter. They've created something that shouldn't exist, gathered an army of witnesses, defied our authority by even questioning our right to investigate and judge. They must face consequences for their presumption. What consequences would you suggest? Aro asked, his tone mild but his eyes sharp. They've broken no law. The child is not immortal. The witnesses came to testify to truth, not to fight us. What precisely should we punish them for, brother? The tension ratcheted higher, the carefully maintained diplomatic surface cracking to reveal the fundamental conflict beneath. Caius wanted destruction because he saw the Cullens' very existence as threat. Their vegetarian lifestyle, their integration with humans, their defiance of traditional vampire isolation and superiority. He wanted them eliminated, not because they'd broken laws, but because they represented change he couldn't control. And Aro wanted their gifts, wanted to acquire Alice and Edward and Bella for his guard, wanted to possess the talents they represented. His apparent reasonableness was strategy, a way to position himself as merciful while maneuvering toward his actual goal of making the Cullens dependent on voluntary goodwill that could be withdrawn at any moment. Perhaps, Aro said slowly, his voice taking on the tone of someone making generous offer. This would be an appropriate time to extend an invitation. Bella, Edward, Alice, you three possess gifts that would be invaluable to our guard. Join us willingly, become part of the Volturi, and we can guarantee not just Renesmee's safety, but your entire coven's permanent security. You would have our protection, our resources, our authority behind you. All we ask in return is your service. The offer was seduction and threat combined, wrapped in pleasant language that couldn't disguise the ultimatum beneath. Join us or face ongoing vulnerability. Give us what we want or accept that we can destroy you whenever we choose. No, Bella said, the word coming out with absolute certainty before Edward or Alice could respond. We're not joining your guard. We're staying with our family, all of us together, or none of us at all. Aro's expression shifted slightly, disappointment flickering across his features. How unfortunate. I had hoped we could reach a mutually beneficial arrangement, but if you insist on refusing our generous offer, then we refuse, Edward said firmly, moving to stand beside Bella, united front against the ancient power that sought to acquire them. We appreciate the invitation, but our answer is no. We'll cooperate with monitoring, we'll follow your laws, we'll do everything necessary to prove Renesmee's safety, but we're not leaving our family to join yours. Alice stepped forward, her small form seeming larger than it should, her confidence radiating from her posture and expression. You should accept that answer, Aro, because I've seen what happens if you try to force us. I've seen the future that unfolds if you push this confrontation into violence. Oh, Aro's interest sharpened immediately. And what future do you see, dear Alice? Give me your hand, Alice said, extending her own small palm toward the ancient vampire. Let me show you what I've seen. Let me share the vision that brought me back here at exactly the right moment. Aro moved forward eagerly, his fascination with Alice's gift overriding his caution. He took her hand, and the moment their skin touched, his entire body went rigid. Bella watched his face transform through a cascade of expressions: curiosity, interest, concern, horror, absolute terror. The vision Alice shared lasted perhaps 2 minutes, but in that time, Aro saw something that shook him to his core. When he released Alice's hand, his papery skin had gone even paler, his milky eyes wide with something that looked remarkably like fear. "I see," he said quietly, and his voice held none of its earlier confidence. "That would indeed be unfortunate." "What did you show him?" Caius demanded, moving toward Alice with fury that suggested he might attack her simply for frightening his brother. "The truth," Alice said simply. "The future that unfolds if the Volturi attack us here today, in this field." I showed him the battle that would result, the casualties on both sides, the ultimate outcome. I showed him which of his guard would die, which of his brothers would fall, which witnesses would survive to tell the story of how the great Volturi were defeated by a single family and their friends. The assembled vampires went absolutely silent, the implications of Alice's words rippling through both sides. The Volturi could be defeated. The vision Alice had shared proved it. Not easily, not without terrible cost, but defeated nonetheless. And if they were defeated, if their invincibility was shattered, their authority over vampire kind would crumble with it. "You would die as well," Aro said quietly, speaking to Alice, but clearly meant for all the Cullens to hear. "Many of you would die. The cost would be catastrophic on both sides." "Yes," Alice agreed. "The cost would be terrible, which is why I'm showing you this vision now, before violence starts, while there's still opportunity to choose a different path. You can let us live in peace, monitoring Renesmee as you suggested, accepting that we mean no threat, or you can force a battle that destroys us both and shatters the Volturi's reputation forever. The choice is yours." Aro stood motionless for a long moment, his mind clearly working through possibilities and ramifications. Bella could see the calculation in his expression, could see him weighing desire for their gifts against the cost Alice had shown him. And slowly, reluctantly, she saw him make his decision. "We will allow the child to live," Aro announced, his voice carrying across the silent field to both sides. "Under the conditions discussed, periodic monitoring, education in our laws, demonstration of appropriate control and discretion. The Cullens have broken no law. The hybrid poses no immediate threat. This matter is resolved." Caius looked ready to explode with fury, his objections dying on his lips only because Aro's authority as senior king overrode his own preferences. Marcus remained impassive as always, apparently indifferent to whether the Cullens lived or died. But the decision was made, the judgment rendered, the confrontation resolved without the violence that had seemed inevitable only moments ago. "However," Aro continued, his voice taking on a harder edge, "there is one matter that requires addressing. Irina of the Dernali clan brought false accusation against the Cullens. Whether her mistake was honest or malicious, it created this entire crisis, brought the Volturi here on false pretenses, wasted our time and resources on investigation of non-existent crime. That cannot go unpunished." Irina stepped forward from the Volturi ranks, her face holding acceptance of what was coming. "I made a mistake," she said quietly. I saw the child from a distance, assumed she was an immortal creation, reported what I believed to be truth. I was wrong. I accept responsibility for my error. Your acceptance is noted, Kaya said coldly. But mistakes that threaten vampire security cannot be forgiven simply because they were unintentional. You understand the penalty. Irina nodded, her eyes finding her sisters in the Cullen witnesses, her expression holding goodbye and sorrow and request for forgiveness all combined. Tanya and Kate stood frozen in horror, understanding what was about to happen but powerless to prevent it. Felix moved with terrible speed, crossing the distance to Irina before anyone could react. His hands found her head and torso, and with one sharp movement he tore her apart. The sound was like marble breaking, sharp and final. Then other guard members descended, dismembering her completely before piling the pieces and setting them aflame. Irina burned in the snow, smoke rising from vampire remains in bitter contrast to the white landscape. Justice served through brutal efficiency that left no doubt about the Volturi's power and willingness to use it. Tanya collapsed to her knees, silent screams shaking her body, though no sound emerged. Kate stood rigid with fury and grief, and only Garrett's arms around her kept her from lunging at the Volturi in suicidal vengeance. "Let this serve as reminder," Aro said quietly, watching the smoke rise. "We enforce our laws absolutely, punish violations without mercy, maintain order through whatever means necessary. The Cullens have been judged innocent, but others should remember the consequences of false accusation, of wasting our time, of threatening the stability we've maintained for 3,000 years." The message was clear. The Cullens had survived, but only barely, and only because Alice had shown Aro futures he couldn't accept. The Volturi's authority remained absolute, their power undiminished despite their retreat, and the price of survival had been paid in Irina's death, in ongoing monitoring, in perpetual vulnerability to Volturi judgment. But they had survived. Renesmee would live, the family would remain together, and for that, Bella would accept any price. The Volturi departed as they had arrived, a dark tide flowing back into the forest, their numbers still overwhelming despite having gained nothing from this confrontation, except a dead witness, and the knowledge that their invincibility was less absolute than they believed. Aro looked back once before disappearing into the trees, his gaze finding Bella's face, his expression holding promise that this was not over, that he would return, that eventually he would possess the gifts he wanted or destroy those who denied him. But for now, they had peace, temporary, fragile, purchased with blood and fear, but peace nonetheless. The witnesses dispersed slowly, each coven and nomad departing with changed understanding of vampire politics and power. Some offered congratulations, others simply left without comment, all of them processing what they'd witnessed and what it meant for their own existence. Only the Denali sisters remained after the others departed, standing over the ashes of their sister. Grief so profound, it filled the clearing with weight that even Bella's newborn senses could feel. Tanya finally looked up, her golden eyes meeting Carlyle's, her voice broken when she spoke. "We don't blame you," she said quietly. "Irina made her choice. She paid for her mistake. We don't blame you." But the words felt hollow, and Bella knew that this wound would take decades, if not centuries, to heal. The witnesses dispersed slowly over the following days, each coven and nomad departing with changed understanding of vampire politics and power. Some offered congratulations before leaving. Others simply vanished into the forest without comment, all of them processing what they'd witnessed and what it meant for their own existence in a world where the Volturi's invincibility had been questioned, if not quite shattered. Only the Denali sisters remained after the others departed, standing over the ashes of Irina that still stained the snow grey and black. Grief so profound, it filled the clearing with weight that even Bella's newborn senses could feel pressing against her consciousness. Tanya finally looked up after hours of silent vigil, her golden eyes meeting Carlyle's across the space that separated them, her voice broken when she finally spoke. "We don't blame you," she said quietly, each word clearly costing her enormous effort. Irina made her choice. She saw what she wanted to see, reported what she believed to be truth, paid the price for her mistake. We don't blame you, Carlyle. We don't blame the Cullens. But we need time. We need space to grieve our sister, to process what we've lost. We can't be here right now. I understand, Carlyle said, his own voice thick with grief and guilt despite Tanya's absolution. Take all the time you need. You're always welcome here, always family to us. When you're ready to return, we'll be waiting. Kate remained silent, her body rigid with fury and sorrow. That Garrett's presence seemed inadequate to comfort. She'd watched her sister die, had been unable to prevent or avenge the execution, and the helplessness clearly ate at her in ways that would take years, if not decades, to process. Carmen wept openly, tears that couldn't fall making her eyes bright with anguish, her grief more visible than Tanya's shock or Kate's rage, but no less profound. They left as the sun set, 3 sisters reduced to 3 survivors, their family fractured by loss that would reshape their relationships forever. Bella watched them disappear into the forest and felt guilt mixing with relief. Guilty that Irina had died partially because of Reneme's existence, relieved that the price hadn't been higher, hadn't included her own family's destruction. The Cullen house felt simultaneously too empty and too full in the days that followed. Empty of the witnesses who'd filled every room with their presence and complicated territorial tensions. Empty of the looming threat that had defined their existence for weeks, but full of the family that remained, full of relief and gratitude, and the strange disorientation of survival when death had seemed inevitable. Bella sought out Nahul during his brief stay before he and the Huaylan returned to South America. Finding him alone in the forest, where he stood looking at the mountains with expression that suggested he was seeing something beyond the physical landscape. He turned when he sensed her approach, his warm hybrid eyes meeting her vampire gold, with understanding that went beyond simple recognition. "You have questions," Nahuel said, statement rather than inquiry, "about what Renesmee will become, what her future holds. I can see it in how you watch her, the concern beneath your love." "Yes," Bella admitted, grateful for his directness. "Arrow saw your memories, learned your history, but I need to understand from you directly, what will Renesmee's life be like? Will she be happy? Will she be safe?" Nahuel was quiet for a moment, considering his words with care that suggested he understood how much weight they carried. "She will reach full maturity around age 7, as I did. Her body will stop aging then, frozen in eternal youth as vampire heritage, overrides human mortality, her mind will continue to develop, not physically, but experientially. She'll accumulate wisdom and knowledge as any immortal does, learning and growing intellectually even though her body remains unchanged. And her lifespan? Bella asked, the question she most feared answering. Immortal, Nahuel said simply. I've lived 150 years and show no signs of aging or deterioration. My sisters are younger, but equally stable. Barring violence or accident, Renesmee will live forever. She'll watch human generations pass, will outlive anyone not transformed to vampire, will experience eternity as you now will. Whether that's blessing or curse depends on how she chooses to see it. Confirmation brought relief so intense it made Bella's knees weak. Renesmee would live, would truly live, not for decades but for centuries, for millennia potentially. She would have the forever Bella had chosen for herself, would experience the eternity that made every sacrifice worthwhile. And her nature, Bella pressed, her hybrid qualities, will they cause her problems? Will she struggle to fit in either vampire or human society? She'll never fully belong to either world, Nahuel said honestly, and the pain in his voice suggested he spoke from personal experience. Vampires will always see her as partially human, contaminated by mortality even though she'll live forever. Humans will sense something wrong about her even if they can't articulate what. She'll exist between worlds, neither fully one nor the other. But that's not necessarily negative. She'll have capabilities both sides lack, will bridge gaps that pure vampires and humans cannot cross. He paused, his expression softening as he thought of something. And she has advantages I never did. She has family who loves her absolutely, who chose her existence despite the cost, who will support her through whatever challenges she faces. She has Jacob's imprint, which means she'll never be alone, never lack for devoted companionship. And she has you, a mother who gave everything to bring her into this world, who loves her enough to have died for her. Those advantages will make her life vastly easier than mine was. Your father, Bella said carefully, remembering what Nahuel had said about Joham creating multiple hybrids. You don't have relationship with him. My father views hybrids as experiments, Nahuel said, his voice going cold. He seeks to create army of half-vampires, believes we're superior to pure vampires because we can pass as human when necessary. He's created my sisters and me and others I've never met. All of us experiments in his quest for power. I want nothing to do with his schemes or his ambitions. I've built my own life separate from his influence. The information was disturbing, suggesting there were other hybrids out there, other children of vampire fathers and human mothers who might someday become complications. But that was a problem for another day, concern to be addressed if and when Joham's experiments became threat, rather than simply existing in distant parts of the world. Thank you, Bella said quietly, for coming here, for testifying, for saving Renesmee's life with your existence. We owe you more than we can ever repay. You owe me nothing, Nahuel said firmly. Alice found me, explained the situation, asked for my help. I gave it willingly because I know what it's like to exist as something unprecedented, something that challenges vampire law simply by being. If my testimony saved your daughter, I'm glad. She deserves the chance to live, to discover what she'll become, to find her own path between worlds. He left the next day with Highland, both of them returning to whatever life they'd built in South America. leaving behind the knowledge that Renesmee wasn't alone in her hybrid nature, that others existed who'd navigated the complications of being neither fully vampire nor fully human. Alice and Jasper's return to the family felt like pieces sliding back into place after weeks of absence. Alice was immediately reintegrated into the household routines, her visions once again guiding the family's decisions and preparations. She explained her disappearance to Bella in private, the two of them sitting in the cottage, while Renesmee played with Edward nearby. "I saw what we needed," Alice said quietly. "Not directly. Renesmee blocks my visions, and anything involving her specifically I can't see clearly. But I saw the edges, the implications. I saw that we needed another hybrid as proof. Saw that one existed in South America. Saw myself finding him at exactly the right moment. So I went, and I brought him back, and it worked exactly as I'd seen it would." "You left us," Bella said, unable to keep the hurt from her voice entirely. "You took Jasper, and you left when we needed you most, when your visions were crucial to our strategy." "I left because my vision showed that's what would save you," Alice corrected gently. "If I'd stayed, if I'd been here when the Volturi arrived, Aro would have touched me immediately and seen everything I knew. He would have seen that I was searching for Nahuel, would have sent his guard to find him first or prevent me from bringing him. The only way to save you all was to leave before the Volturi arrived, to stay hidden until the exact moment when Nahuel's testimony would be most effective." "The documents," Bella said, remembering Jay Jenks and the escape plan Alice had prepared. "The papers for Jacob and Renesmee. You prepared for our failure." "I prepared for every possibility," Alice said. "I saw futures where we won and futures where we lost. I couldn't see which would actually happen. Too many variables, too many choices that hadn't been made yet. So I planned for both. If we'd lost, if the Volturi had destroyed us, Jacob would have taken Renesmee and run. He would have raised her using those documents, kept her safe until she was old enough to protect herself. That was the backup plan, the last resort, if everything else failed. But we didn't fail," Bella said, allowing herself to feel the relief fully for the first time since the confrontation. "We survived. Renesmee is safe. The family is intact." "Yes," Alice agreed, her face breaking into the first genuine smile Bella had seen from her since her return. "We survived. And now we get to live the future I always saw for us. Together, safe, whole. Forever stretching ahead with all the time in the world to be family." The cottage became central to Bella's existence in the weeks following the Volturi's departure. The private space where she and Edward and Renesmee could exist as simply family, without the complications of witnesses and politics and ongoing threat. They established routines that felt almost human in their domesticity. Meals for Renesmee, who still required food alongside blood. Bedtime rituals despite her hybrid nature, requiring less sleep than human children. Quiet evenings with Edward playing piano, while Bella and Renesmee listened in comfortable silence. Renesmee's growth continued, but at moderated pace, the frightening acceleration of her first months slowing to something more sustainable. She appeared perhaps 7 years old now, despite being only 6 months old chronologically, her body approaching the maturity Nahuel had described. Carlyle estimated she had perhaps another year before she stopped aging entirely, 12 more months of childhood before eternal stasis locked her in permanent youth. Her intelligence remained remarkable, her understanding of complex concepts far exceeding her apparent age. She read voraciously, consuming books at vampire speed, her hybrid mind processing information with efficiency that combined human curiosity and vampire memory. She spoke multiple languages, learned musical instruments with ease that suggested inheriting Edward's musical gifts, demonstrated artistic talent that made Esme weep with pride. But beneath the accelerated development, she remained fundamentally a child, playful and affectionate, and occasionally petulant when she didn't get her way. She had Edward's stubbornness and Bella's determination, combined with her own unique personality that emerged more distinctly as she grew. She loved fiercely, trusted completely, approached the world with optimism that would have been dangerous if she weren't surrounded by family devoted to protecting her. Jacob's presence remained constant, his imprint bond making separation from Renesmee essentially impossible. But the nature of their relationship had evolved from the awkwardness of Bella's initial resistance into something more comfortable. Jacob was Renesmee's best friend, her constant companion, her protector who would die before allowing harm to reach her. The romantic implications of the imprint remained distant future considerations, relevant only when Renesmee reached maturity and could make her own choices about what she wanted their relationship to become. For now, Jacob was simply Uncle Jake, the warm presence who could make Renesmee laugh like no one else, who shifted to wolf form to give her rides through the forest, who taught her about Quileute legends and pack dynamics and the complicated history between vampires and shapeshifters. His devotion was absolute but appropriate, his love for Renesmee pure in ways that made Bella's early concerns seem ridiculous in retrospect. Seth remained part of their lives as well, his infectious optimism and genuine affection for the Cullens making him welcome in ways that transcended the traditional vampire-werewolf enmity. He'd become particularly close to Edward, the two of them sharing private jokes and easy companionship that suggested genuine friendship rather than simple alliance. Leah maintained more distance, her bitterness not fully healed by time or circumstances, but even she seemed more at peace than she'd been during the tense weeks of preparation for the Volturi. Sam's pack kept their distance, but maintained the treaty, the invisible boundary between Cullen territory and Quileute land, respected by both sides. The near war had taught everyone the cost of conflict, had demonstrated that cooperation served everyone's interests better than hostility. The peace was fragile but real, built on mutual respect and the understanding that Renesmee served as bridge between their kinds rather than point of contention. Charlie visited regularly, his acceptance of Bella's transformation growing more complete with each encounter. Sue Clearwater had told him more of the truth than Bella had thought possible, giving him framework to understand what his daughter had become without overwhelming him with details he didn't need. He knew Bella was different, knew she was strong and fast, and would live far longer than normal humans. He knew Renesmee was special, grew faster than normal children, would eventually stop aging entirely. What he didn't know, what Sue had carefully avoided explaining, was the specifics of vampire nature, the blood drinking and the hunting and the full extent of the supernatural world that existed alongside human society. Some knowledge was too dangerous, too overwhelming, too likely to shatter the comfortable relationship they'd rebuilt after Bella's transformation. "You're happy, Bells?" Charlie asked during one visit, the two of them sitting on the cottage porch, while Renesmee played in the meadow with Jacob watching over her. "Really happy? Not just pretending for my sake?" "I'm really happy, Dad," Bella said honestly, meaning it with every fibre of her being. "Happier than I ever imagined possible. I have Edward, I have Renesmee, I have family and forever stretching ahead. This is everything I wanted." Charlie nodded slowly, his weathered face showing acceptance, tinged with melancholy. "You grew up so fast. Seems like yesterday you were arriving in Forks. Just an awkward kid trying to fit in. Now look at you, married, mother, all grown up and starting your real life. I'm proud of you, Bells. Proud of the choices you've made, even the ones I didn't understand at the time." The words made Bella's eyes burn with tears that couldn't fall. Gratitude and love for her father overwhelming her careful control. "Thank you, Dad. That means everything to me." Renee called frequently from Florida, her phone conversations with Bella full of enthusiastic questions about Renesmee's development and married life, and the general happiness that radiated from Bella's voice. She'd accepted the explanations about Bella's condition with her characteristic optimism, choosing to focus on her daughter's happiness rather than dwelling on the impossibilities and complications. Phil supported her in this, his easygoing nature making him perfect companion for Renee's spontaneous approach to life. "You'll bring Renee to visit eventually, won't you?" Renee asked during one call. "I know she grows fast. I know there are complications with her health condition, but I'm her grandmother, Bella. I want to know her, want to be part of her life." "We'll visit," Bella promised, knowing it would be complicated but possible. Renesmee could pass as human for brief periods, could control her strength and speed enough to avoid drawing attention. Maybe next year, when she's a bit more mature. "We'll come to Florida, spend time with you and Phil, let you spoil your granddaughter properly." The family settled into rhythms that felt sustainable, routines that suggested permanence rather than temporary peace between crises. Emmett and Rosalie resumed their usual patterns of extended hunting trips and private time away from the main house. Jasper and Alice remained inseparable, their bond deepened by the weeks of separation during Alice's search for Noelle. Carlisle and Esme radiated parental satisfaction at having their family intact and safe, the threat that had nearly destroyed them averted by a combination of luck and strategy, and Alice's perfect timing. Edward and Bella existed in state of contentment that felt miraculous after everything they'd endured to reach this point. They hunted together regularly, Bella's control now solid enough that human blood no longer presented overwhelming temptation. They explored Bella's vampire capabilities, discovering the full extent of her speed and strength and shield. They spent long nights in the cottage making love with the freedom Bella had always craved, her vampire body finally capable of matching Edward's intensity without fear of injury. And they parented Renesmee together, both of them learning as they went, making mistakes and corrections and discoveries about what their unique daughter needed and wanted. She was easy child in many ways, her intelligence making discipline rarely necessary, her affectionate nature making her eager to please. But she was also challenging in ways specific to her hybrid nature, requiring blood alongside regular food, needing intellectual stimulation that exceeded normal childhood education, struggling occasionally with the loneliness of being singular in her existence. "Am I the only one?" Renesmee asked one evening, her hand on Bella's face so she could share the full complexity of her question through her gift. "The only hybrid? The only person like me in the whole world?" "No," Bella said gently, thinking of Nawel and his sisters existing somewhere in South America. "There are others like you, sweetheart. Not many, but you're not completely alone. And you have us, your family who loves you absolutely. You have Jacob, who will always be here for you. You have a whole life ahead of you to meet others and discover where you fit in this world." "But I'll never be normal," Renesmee said, her voice small and sad in ways that broke Bella's heart. "I'll never be fully vampire like you and Dad. I'll never be fully human like the kids I see when we go to town. I'll always be in between, always different, always alone in my own category." "Different isn't bad," Edward said, joining the conversation from where he'd been listening at the piano. "Different is what makes you special, Nessie. You can exist in both worlds, can understand both sides in ways pure vampires and humans never will. You're not incomplete, you're enhanced. You have the best of both natures." "Your father's right," Bella added, "and you're only half a year old, sweetheart. You have literally forever to figure out where you fit, to find your place, to discover what being hybrid means for your life. Don't rush to define yourself when you've barely begun existing." Renesmee seemed to accept this, her concerns eased by her parents' certainty, even if not completely resolved. She would struggle with identity questions for years, probably for decades or centuries, as she accumulated experience and perspective. But she would struggle surrounded by love and support, never truly alone even in her uniqueness. Christmas approached, the holiday taking on new significance for family that had nearly been destroyed only weeks before. Esme decorated the main house with enthusiasm that bordered on manic, as if covering every surface with lights and greenery could somehow cement the happiness they'd fought so hard to preserve. Alice helped with her usual perfectionism, arranging and rearranging ornaments until every detail met her exacting standards. They gathered on Christmas Eve, all of them together in the main house, the only family that mattered regardless of blood or species, or the complications that came with loving across traditional boundaries. Emmett blazed Santa for Renesmee, his booming laugh and genuine joy in her happiness making the role perfect for him. Rosalie watched with tears in her eyes, living vicariously through Renesmee's childhood in ways that partially healed wounds from her own stolen human life. Edward played Christmas carols on the piano, his fingers moving across the keys with the perfection of a century's practice, creating music that filled the house with warmth and beauty. Bella sang along softly, her musical voice another gift of transformation, harmonizing with Edward's melody in ways that made their love audible to everyone present. Charlie and Sue joined them for dinner. The meal prepared for the humans present, the vampires pretending to eat with practiced ease. Renesmee sat between her human grandfather and her vampire parents, literal embodiment of the bridge between worlds, living proof that impossible loves could create miraculous results. As the evening wound down, as Charlie and Sue departed and Renesmee finally succumbed to sleep despite her excitement, Bella stood in the cottage, looking out at the snow-covered forest and felt complete. She'd been human, fragile and clumsy, and constantly endangered by her love for a vampire. She'd been pregnant, her body destroyed by the impossible child growing inside her. She'd been dying, her heart stopped, and her consciousness fading toward nothing. And now she was vampire, strong and fast and eternal. She was mother to a miracle child who would live forever. She was wife to the person who transformed her entire existence simply by loving her. She was part of a family that had faced ancient power and survived through a combination of courage and strategy and absolute determination to protect each other. The Volturi would return eventually. Aro's promise had been clear in his final look. They would monitor Renesmee's development, would seek opportunities to acquire the Cullen's gifts, would remain threat lurking in the background of their lives. But that was future problem, concern for another day. Tonight, Bella had everything she'd fought for, everything she'd sacrificed for, everything she'd chosen despite the cost. Edward's arms came around her from behind, his cold embrace perfect match for her own temperature. Two immortals holding each other while their daughter slept peacefully nearby. "What are you thinking?" he murmured against her hair. "That I would do it all again," Bella said quietly. "Every moment, every sacrifice, every danger. All of it was worth this." "So would I," Edward said. "Every century of loneliness before I found you. Every moment of fear while you were transforming. Every second of terror facing the Volturi. All of it was worth reaching this moment." They stood together watching snow fall through the forest. Two vampires and a sleeping hybrid child. A family that shouldn't exist but did. Anyway, living proof that love could overcome even the impossible when people chose each other absolutely and without reservation. Forever stretched ahead of them, vast and unknown and full of possibility. And Bella couldn't wait to experience every moment of it. And so, dear dreamy travelers, our journey through Bella's transformation reaches its gentle end. From human fragility to immortal strength, from impossible pregnancy to miraculous child, from ancient judgment to hard-won peace. We've witnessed love that conquered even death itself. The Cullens stand together now, their family whole, their future stretching endlessly forward. Renesmee will grow into her hybrid nature, protected by devotion that transcends species and time. And Bella has finally found what she always sought, forever with those she loves most. So let these stories of impossible choices and eternal consequences fade softly into your dreams, where love always triumphs and families never truly end. Sleep well, my dreamy travelers, and know that some bonds are stronger than any law, any danger, any obstacle the universe places in their path. Rest now in the twilight between waking and dreaming, where forever is not a burden but a gift, and every ending is simply a new beginning waiting to unfold. Sweet dreams, and may love guide you always into the gentle darkness where all stories find their peace.